And recording has started.
Okay, so I'll start over. My name is Melanie Lebrecq, and I am the Public Safety Chair for Northwest San Pedro Neighborhood Council, as well as the Treasurer. And I'd like to welcome everybody here to our town hall special meeting. The reason this town hall was put together was that the purpose of it is to further conversation for better understanding about the event that took place at Point Fermin Park on October 16, 2021. The community left the CPAB meeting wanting more conversation and more things that were left unanswered. And our hope is to achieve some answers to those questions in this forum tonight. The town hall here is in partnership with LAPD, Harbor Division, Community Police Advisory Board, and the Northwest San Pedro Neighborhood Council. Our panel tonight is, we don't have anybody from the mayor's office at this time or CD15. LAPD, Captain Masnick and Sergeant Shun, the city attorney's office, Kahil Rashid, Recon Park, DN Deadman, and Sergeant Holmes from Park Rangers. We have Mona Sutton is the CPAB chair, and that's our panel. I would like to also introduce our facilitator for tonight, who is Ray Regalado. And our vice president of Northwest San Pedro Neighborhood Council is Chris Valier, and he's going to be leading some of the questions for the panel. And I turn it over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Melanie. Yes, my name is Chris Valier. I am vice president of Northwest San Pedro Neighborhood Council. And in short, the sort of inspiration for this meeting was just a little flurry of conversation after the CPAB meeting. People wanted more time to talk. There were things that they didn't feel were covered, and some things that we felt needed to be asked who weren't present at CPAB. So we saw this as an opportunity to circle back with everyone and just have a broader conversation on some of the sort of background issues or related issues to this event, which, by all intents, concluded peacefully. There were, I believe there were no arrests and things like that. Personally, my perspective from this, considering some of the things that have happened recently around the country with respect to protests and people's behavior, is clearly that some things are beyond our control. Others may be in that gray zone, and other things, can be or permitted or not. And so what I wanted to try and prompt was some conversation about how that process works. That is, when things are approved or not, how does that take place, and who makes those determinations? And then also, to some extent, with respect to the way the policing is addressed, that is, the parts of it that that the LAPD is comfortable or able to talk to us about in terms of things like threat assessment, or what your sort of real-time decisions are in a situation like this. And I would hope that the follow-through from this meeting would be a greater rapport and a more current conversation on these types of things, so that if in the future, when foreseeably things like this may happen again, we know who to go to, or agencies may have a sense of what if, maybe we give people a heads up, maybe we don't, or what would we say, and to whom would we speak in advance of things like this, really, so that the community has a sense of confidence. Because I think one of the issues that some people were confused about what had happened and why not, and things like that, so that they have a sense of what it should look like, and that we know that as much as possible these things are they have a lid on them. And I guess without much more prep, I guess what we might like to have after this, and I know that for Public Safety Committee there will be essentially a debrief of this meeting. And in the future, with respect to the other panelists from Parks and from city attorneys and from LAPD, I know in particular for Northwest, we'd like to have an ongoing, relationship with your agencies, where we can field questions, where you guys, the things that you'd like to bring to our attention, and things like that, that we kind of have an open door and an open channel for those types of things. So I will hand off to Ray, and just a couple of prompts that for our panelists and for our attendees, some sort of general questions to either address directly or to think about as we go on. Why was this particular event allowed to happen, or what was the process when it was when a permit was requested, when it became clear there was not going to be one, and a little bit of nuts and bolts on how those things work. Who's responsible for providing those things, and is there feedback from other agencies that goes into that process? And I guess we were referring to city attorneys because we'd like to know how the basic constitutional freedoms would apply to these sorts of things. Obviously, speech and assembly, but anything else that's related. And then, in particular, and unfortunately, we don't have anybody in attendance at this moment. We were concerned with a social media post from Council District 15's office about what was expected to happen on the day of the event. And the particular questions that I and other people had were, what, if any, communication happened before that in between CD15 and any other agencies? In the future, would something like that be beneficial? Is that, possible for the agencies and these offices to get on the same page? Again, and whether it's to give a more accurate or more realistic expectations about these types of things, or just to stay on each other's radar, we'd like to have addressed. And I think that's enough out of me.
Chris, one thing I'd like to add too is people are asking in the questionnaire of what happened that day. So maybe we should do a brief explanation as to what exactly occurred.
Yeah, I would suppose anybody with any direct knowledge, if you could sort of get us up to speed with just the broad strokes of what happened on the day in question. Thank you.
I could go ahead and take that, Chris. So the Los Angeles Police Department became aware there was going to be a planned event. It was a circulated flyer. We found it on social media. I believe it was called a Fall Love Fest, and it had a list of about 8 speakers on it. We did a threat assessment on it. We determined who those folks were, what their affiliation was, and it was a concern to the police department that they had planned on coming down to San Pedro at Point Fermin. Based on that, I reached out to the organizers, who didn't get back to me, to see what their plans were, to see what they had intended to host, and if they had filed permits and things of that nature. I later came to find out that they had filed an application for a permit, and it was in the review process. And I believe the review process had gone through the Department of Parks and Recreation. And one of the requirements for that was an insurance policy of some type. And there was a threshold of I think a dollar value that they needed to have coverage for to host their event at that park. That permit was ultimately denied. I believe that denial came either on Thursday or Friday before the event. The event was on Saturday, the 16th. It was kind of a question. I suppose we'll tackle it when it comes up. But I had called Joe Buscaino. I'm on a first name basis with Joe, and called him on that Thursday and expressed my concerns about it. And of 2 groups, so certainly one group and the potential for a second group to arrive that may cause conflict, or they may have a problem between the 2 groups, and expressed to Joe that I had a concern about that, and that the permit was in the review process. Either Thursday or Friday, I received word that their permit had been denied. And I believe, I don't know for sure, but my understanding was they couldn't get an insurance policy for whatever that threshold amount was. That was the reason that was explained to me on why it was a no. I called back Joe, I'm sure it was on Friday, and said it did not go through. So I was appreciative of the fact that it had not gone through. During that last day before the event, there were other social media postings that it may go to Culver City or West LA. There was some mention of those places that it may go as like an alternate site. Not believing that they would go somewhere else, I had put together a plan beginning about a week beforehand of concerns that if violence might erupt, and concerns between one or more groups that were there. So I had requested a plan for on-duty resources from all over Los Angeles. So I sent that through my chain of command, first to South Bureau, which is basically all of Los Angeles south of the 10 freeway. And if we're able to manage an issue, a concern with police resources, first it's done at the division level, just at Harbor. If I need help, I go to my boss at South Bureau, and they will put together resources from the bureau level. And if my request is above the level of police officers that they can send just at the bureau level, then it will go to above the bureau to the Office of Operations, and they will begin to assemble resources from all over Los Angeles. The number of police officers I wanted for the event was significant. If it did erupt into a problem, I wanted adequate resources to police it and to, if necessary, break it up, call an unlawful assembly, if necessary, effect arrests, maintain order, and things of that nature. I had also requested a squad of Metropolitan Division to stage that regularly deal with protests, oftentimes in downtown LA. All of my requests were approved. The resources were sent down that Saturday morning. I had everybody staged. Best of my recollection, is about 8 o'clock in the morning. If I remember right, I think it was going to kick off at, I believe late morning was the scheduled plan of the beginning of the event. But I wanted to get resources down there early, and they did. They arrived in place. I assembled all the police officers, briefed the leadership about my expectations for the event and how I wanted it to go down and what was acceptable and what wasn't. Established lines of communication and forward observers. And ultimately, the way it ended up going down, I ended up breaking up our police officers into groups of 2 rather than into squads and helmets and batons. I put the police officers out with batons in the ring and in pairs throughout the park. And really, 118 police officers, I inundated the park with police officers with not knowing what to expect. They did hold their event. They did arrive. My recollection was somewhere around 200 people had arrived. I believe there were some other folks we believed were also from Antifa that had arrived. Gave a clear message about not erecting a stage, not having amplified music, not having a speaker or a megaphone. At one point, they did produce a megaphone, which the police officers asked them to put it away, and they complied. We did affect some detentions that day, detained some people, searched some people. We did not make any arrests that day. There were no citations issued that day. It ran till probably about, they had numerous speakers. They weren't on a stage. It ran till probably about 3 o'clock, 3:30. And I believe that time they indicated they were going to start breaking it up. I think they broke it down after 4. I kept the police officers in place till around 5, and then sometime around 6, we wrapped everything up, and I was the last one to leave. So I'm not sure if that covered a solid synopsis. If there's any additional questions.
I think as a timeline, that's a very good start. Could you tell us a little bit about, because I know, because I've heard this in the news recently, are there sort of levels of response? You clearly anticipated, the need for additional manpower and things like that. But things like TAC alerts, or what things you look for, or the ways that you sort of do a real-time assessment of what's happening when you're trying to figure out how, really what to do or whether to do anything.
Sure.
Well, I was just going to say, because I think there might be a perception that, one question that I had was, from the law enforcement point of view, you may see things, or I'm sorry, from a civilian point of view, myself or other people may see things that are alarming or upsetting or disagreeable or whatever, and they may or may not move the needle in terms of a law enforcement perspective. And so I think there was there were comments and some observations made by attendees at the CPAB meeting that I was sort of wondering if maybe police saw it the same way or differently. That is, in terms of, when you might decide to step in or act or say something relative to when the casual observer might simply, start to freak out.
Let me kind of take them one by one. So we have events and we have incidents. If it's an event, it's something I have on the calendar. It's something I can anticipate. Generally speaking, and if it's something I can get my arms around with an understanding about it, I can properly deploy. And my department typically does a pretty good job on things that we can see coming. On this, I did see it as a high degree of threat. I thought there was a propensity towards violence, and I wanted to have adequate resources in place. On an incident, it's a little bit different. We still drop an incident action plan, but you're really on the spot for resources, and it's something that's scaling up. Going back to 2019, we had it was a radio call of an active shooter. It was at Kaiser Harbor City. Turned out to be a false alarm. It just ended up being nothing. But we responded to it as an active shooter, and the event scaled up very, very, very quickly. We brought resources, on-duty resources in from all over the place, from all over Los Angeles down to Harbor area. So things I can plan, things I can't plan. Things I can plan, every event will stand on its own 2 feet, and I'll size it up. I'll do kind of a threat assessment of my own and see what resources I think to police it effectively. And everyone stands on its own 2 feet. So it could be something, a protest at a city official's house or a county official's house here in Harbor area. We'll send 2 units and a supervisor, and we'll monitor the event. As long as the folks keep walking back and forth and not blocking a driveway or impeding anything. There's a new city ordinance on the books that says you can't come within 300 feet. In those circumstances, if everybody's complying with the law, and if they're not, if they're within 300 feet, we would warn them and ask them to step back. And typically they do step back, and they kind of want to get their voice heard. So they move back, and they remain in place and within 300 feet or within the guidelines of the law for whatever the incident is. We'll typically monitor it. We'll have police officers there. I like to have a supervisor there and monitor it depending on the size of the event. If it's several hundred people, then I'm going to bring in a great deal of police resources. You asked about TAC alerts. TAC alerts, what a TAC alert is in a nutshell is it's when you don't believe you have adequate on-duty resources to manage it. And what a TAC alert, the effect of a tactical alert in Los Angeles is the department won't respond to anything except for high priority calls. So it takes the police officers off. I'll use the term, it applies in this case, the burden of radio calls or nuisance calls or loud radios or a loud party, things like that. And it restricts the response of police officers to just high priority calls. High priority calls, crimes in progress, robberies, serious felonies, things of that nature. And it clears what we call the queue of radio calls. And it takes the burden off of handling the routine calls, the things we want to have handled. And it takes it down to the things we absolutely need to have handled. And that's what a tactical alert is. So if an incident's spiraling out of control, I'll let you know that in Wilshire area, in response to follow home robberies that had occurred, I believe in the last 2 weeks, on one evening, they were experiencing a great number of robberies, and to clear up police units, police resources, they called a tactical alert in Wilshire area and had a lot more police officers able to respond to those crimes in progress. So that's the purpose of a TAC alert. I will say typically, if it's an event that's planned, and I use that word on purpose, if it's an event that we can plan for and see coming, the goal is to not be caught shorthanded and have to call a TAC alert. We want to plan for the adequate response to police for things that we want to do every day, the commitments to the community that we need to fulfill. So if there is a loud radio, we do want to send a police officer. We want to get there on time. We want to handle that kind of a thing. If I didn't plan properly for a large event and it happened, I might need to call a TAC alert to get the available resources out there. So that's kind of what the definition of that is.
I'd like to comment here for a minute. Joanna, thank you for attending and acknowledge that Joanna from the mayor's office is here.
Thanks, Captain. Yeah. And welcome.
And Chris, you want to take them one by one as we go through?
Sure. Well,
Chris,
I guess
you want to have each of the panelists answer questions maybe on basically what their role is for an event like this, and also if there's anyone that's present that, like Captain Mazdak, maybe a rough overview of First Amendment, what it means, why the determination is on the First Amendment, maybe in your interpretation of it, of the First Amendment, how it directs, how this changes from an event to a protest, and how all of a sudden it's allowed without a permit. What category, and maybe Deanna too, what category allows this to happen when the permit was denied. Because I think that's a concern, because there was a lot of communication from CD15 posted on social media saying this event was not going to happen, that LAPD was going to keep it from happening. And that circulated all over social media. And then the event happened. And I think that is part of the disgruntlement, is it was social media was told by CD15 this wasn't going to happen, and then it did. And so understanding what changes an event to a protest, and all of a sudden all holds bar, they get to have it, even though everything was denied. What moved it into that?
Well, I think maybe before we go into those things more specifically, we should give the other panelists an opportunity to sort of talk in general terms about how these types of things affect their departments, and sort of what they're, because again, depending on who we're speaking with, there may be slices of this that don't really overlap some of the other panelists. So if we could sort of create a sort of a landscape for these things, and then kind of drill down.
So Chris, this is Sergeant Sohn. Can I jump in real quick? Because I wanted to actually clarify something. So there's different types of permits. So Rec and Parks has their own permitting system, right? So this particular event request went through Rec and Parks. There's also special events permits that go through the Board of Police Commissioners. And so these are for those major parades, or like the Women's March, these huge First Amendment events. And so those actually go through the Board of Police Commission. And there are other events like where you'll have like this, a local, like the art walk out in Wilmington, they'll have a permit for a street closure. So those are the BOSS permits. So there's actually different types of permits that are out there. And so I just wanted to make sure that people understood that different people have different policies on how they approve permitting. So I just wanted to kind of give that in the context of people are kind of overlapping certain things. And I just wanted to make sure that with the October 16th event, we're looking specifically at Rec and Parks approving or denying a permit.
That's an important clarification, I think,
yes.
Knowing that they don't always go to the same desk for the same reasons.
Yes, so these are different entities that have, so the Bureau of Street Services actually looks at the BOSS permits for street closures versus the special events permitting for First Amendment and parades through the Board of Police Commissioners. And then you have the Rec and Parks permits. So hopefully that gives a little bit of context for which to have this conversation, because in this particular event, we're looking at Rec and Parks. But in general, I actually pulled up the LAPD's policy regarding how we look at free speech and assembly, because I think this is important kind of for the context for people to kind of understand. And this is actually within our policy related to crowd management, intervention, and crowd control. And so one of the things that we always say in the LAPD is like the two fundamental core principles when we look at the First Amendment is respect for people and service to our communities. And so free speech and assembly are guaranteed by not only the federal, but also our state constitution. And so for us, we're protecting the constitutional rights of all members of the public. So that's the framework in which we're looking at. So these constitutional rights apply to any individual participating in lawful activities. So these are public speeches, marches, demonstrations, picketing, so like labor picketing, rallies, and celebratory events. So hopefully that kind of gives a guideline as we move forward.
Thank you very much. It does. Could we hear from maybe Department of Rec and Parks about how this overlaps with their process and their approach to these sorts of things, and any response? Obviously, if it becomes a law enforcement situation, hopefully it wouldn't be your problem directly, but having a ranger here could probably speak to that as well.
Sure. Good evening. Again, my name is Deanne Dedman. I'm the superintendent in the Pacific region for the Department of Recreation and Parks. So basically, kind of backwards from where Captain Mastick started, a person will come into our office or to a facility, right? Usually there's a person on duty. If not, there's a local rec center nearby that pocket park, but they do go to the director, the full-time staff that's on duty for a specific park. They'll fill out an application form. It goes through a review process, which comes to our region office. There's a supervisor there that does a lot of question answering back and forth with the patron. And then depending on the size of the event, quite honestly, if it's, you know, a small picnic, if it's, you know, just a birthday party, those types of things, they don't get real hard reviews. When something seems a little bit bigger than that, and then especially anything over, you know, 500 people, we definitely put them through a bigger review. This permit actually came in as a 20 to 100 person rally kind of speaker type of event. And so the review process started because of that number was a little bit odd. And so during the review, we found that, you know, talking to the patron a little bit more, it was going to be up into, you know, the thousands of persons. And so at that point, we do a bigger review. We bring in our maintenance staff. At this point, we also, LAPD was also involved at that point with us. So they helped with the walkthroughs and reviewing the permits with us. And so, but requirements for permittees, depending on what it is, event this size and this magnitude, they required cleaning staff, security, porta toilets. They were given instructions on how to set up, clean up, break down. They were required to bring for insurance for their event, and also to bring in dumpsters, those types of things, just off the top of my head. I think there might have been other little things that they were required to do, but those are the major things that most larger events are required to do for our department. And then from there, Captain Mastic kind of gave you an overview of kind of how the process went for the rest of the time. But as Sergeant Song had mentioned, we do have different types of permits, even within our own department. You know, we have a lot of people come and ask for First Amendment permits, right? And so basically it's a questionnaire that staff fill out on the grounds. They can ask right off, will there be amplified sound? Will you be erecting a booth or a stage? Are you looking for exclusive use of one area of any given park? Are you using motorized vehicles? Are you restricting access to something? Are you trying to make any kind of commercial sales or any kind of sales at all on park property? If they answer yes to any of those, then they're required to have a permit, and it's no longer a First Amendment event for us. And so, but that's kind of how we start and where we go. You know, again, we do applications for permits for people all the time, just for simple things, you know, birthday parties, picnics, those types of things in the park, normal uses. And then we also have larger special events that happen in our parks as well. You know, we have the ALWU picnic that happened at Pet Park this last year. We used to have the Taste in San Pedro down at Point Fermin, you know, larger event, those scale types of things as well. So, but, you know, we also then refer people to, like Sergeant Song said, all the different city departments as they're needed, if they step out into the street, if they want to have a parade, if they, you know, just different types of things. But for park property, that's the basically how we issue permits.
Would it be safe to say, thank you, would it be safe to say that this event, or was this group was allowed to continue because they'd sort of, it sounds like maybe they'd stripped away all of the things that might have required a permit otherwise, and they were really left with, you know, just basically just their physical presence in the park? I mean, did they attempt to do any of the things that would have otherwise required a permit? I mean, I believe the captain mentioned that they had a megaphone out at one point, but it sounds like maybe whatever it is they had planned, they just basically stripped down to just them physically entering the park. And
Right.
Okay. And so could we have someone from the city attorney's office sort of sound off on the city level to that again? And I understand there's the division of labor that would involve parks and police for those sorts of things, but are there higher level sort of legal considerations that go into how the city addresses this type of thing?
Good evening. This is Khalil Rashid. I am with the criminal branch of the Los Angeles City Attorney's Office, and I'm a criminal prosecutor and the neighborhood prosecutor for the Harbor Division, which includes San Pedro, et cetera, the Point Fermin area. We actually have no role in the criminal branch with issuing, denying, suggesting, or implying who should or should not receive a permit. And it's particularly important that we keep that independence of that process. Because should something happen in the San Pedro area or anywhere throughout the city that is a misdemeanor, we may be charged with actually prosecuting that crime. As a result of that, we do not take sides on who should or should not be doing. what or where in the city, but whether or not something has constituted a crime in the city. In this case, we work particularly close with the Harbor Division, as well as Council District 15, even some of the neighborhood councils, about particular problems that they may be facing that are either endemic or people that are maybe causing a consistent problem. And we try to address that, the criminality of that. So there is a opportunity or a chance that should some conduct occur at an event, First Amendment or otherwise, or permitted or unpermitted, that does violate the Los Angeles Municipal Code or Penal Code, that we can end up prosecuting it. So that would be the role of the criminal side of the city attorney's office. I believe we might also have another member of our office on the call. I'm not sure, but if so, he or she might be able to speak to other roles we have in that process, if any. Thank you.
Is there someone else in the attendees that's from the city attorney's office? Please raise your hand if you are. Huh.
Do not see that.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it, or they're not able to raise their hand maybe. Khalil, Khalil, who was going to be here? Do you know?
I don't. We have a Chinese wall. Excuse me. I don't know if that's politically correct to say anymore, but we actually have a separation. I don't deal with that branch for this very reason. I should not have any input in their decisions, etc. So
Right.
I wouldn't even know who that is. I know we have a civil side that deals with civil issues, and we also have another side that advises LAPD specific. I deal with the criminal side.
Okay. Thank
Well,
you.
It did sort of, it reminded me of something I was questioning before in terms of broader approaches to these things, because you talked, about not taking sides and things like that. Are there resources outside the traditional departments and agencies of the city, let's say at the state or federal level? Because I in the context of this particular event and the particular group, the Proud Boys in question, who may or may not be known to other agencies, are there resources for, or do you think is there an interest at the state or federal level in the activities of a group like this as they would pertain to anything that happens locally? Would you be able to reach out, or are there resources that a local agency might be able to use to address them, or to just even to analyze what may be happening?
I wouldn't have an insight into their priorities. To the extent that the organization has been deemed a criminal organization, I'm not saying that this one has, then state, federal, and even possibly other local agencies may have some involvement in that, particularly the investigative agencies. But I highly doubt the prosecutorial agencies at my level would. And as far as I know, we do not. But I truly cannot really speak to what their priorities or insights are, because I'm not part of their entities.
Okay, well, and do we have anyone else, any of our panelists who'd like to sort of, set any prompts for the attendees, or with any kind of opening statement? Hearing none. Well, Mel, do you think we might want to start taking questions from our attendees? Oh, you're muted.
I'd like to Ray
Oh.
being the facilitator. He has some ground rules he needs to go over, as well as.
So, hi, good evening, everyone. Just as a quick introduction, I'm Ray Regalado. I'm a resident of San Pedro. Originally, well, some of my background is that I am a manager with the Los Angeles County Human Relations Commission, and I handle the countywide dispute resolution program that we have throughout the county. I've facilitated many meetings throughout the county similar to these, and one of the biggest efforts that we want to make sure that this conversation with our community members will be respectful. We want to make sure that everyone who is here attending has an opportunity to ask a question. The question, will allow you 2, maybe 3 minutes at the most to maybe either make a comment or ask the question. And then we'll give the appropriate agency or individual the opportunity to respond. We will go and make sure that everyone has an opportunity to ask at least one question, and if we have time, we'll go around a second time for this. I'd like to make sure, and I'm seeing people already raising their hands, and I have 4 hands raised right now, and I'm going to take them in order as I see them. So with your permission, I'd like to go ahead and start asking people to ask questions. At the end, we'll have an opportunity for our panelists and our hosts to make a final comment if they would like. But for right now, like I said, we're just hoping to have a respectful conversation, dialogue, and use this opportunity to learn. I think there's a lot of points here that were said. I really appreciate what was said earlier by the panelists. And I would have to say that there's been a lot of good information shared. So with that, I see at least 8 hands raised. I'm going to go ahead and start. Melanie and Chris, you'll be the timekeepers. So they have, again, 2 to 3 minutes to ask their question or make their comment, and then we'll give the appropriate individual an opportunity to answer. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the person by the name of Jen. Jen, if you could maybe, if you could unmute Jen, and Jen, go ahead and maybe identify who you're with, if you're with an agency or anything, in turn, ask your question.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for allowing people to speak to your panel. I think that's very important to have that line of communication open. I do have some questions. I was an attendee at the event. I was also a speaker. I am the president of Latinos United for America, and also national vice president at Latinos for Trump. One of the main concerns that I had was the the amount that was predicted that was to be at the park that day. That was totally over exaggerated. That was not even in the numbers that we had on our ends. And so I really don't understand why Parks and Recreation estimated these numbers. Those numbers weren't even on our social media pages, not even in the response. In one channel, we only had like 73 members that were considering going. And that's what you can actually divide that in half, because we've been doing events for many, many years, and it's usually about half of what's expected. I do know that 2 of the other organizers did meet with the Parks and Recreation, and that the permit prices just kept escalating and escalating. Pricing was so high that they weren't able to fundraise in enough time to hold the event. So the event was ultimately canceled. I don't even understand why the Proud Boys are being mentioned here. We invited the Proud Boys to offer security. They are a great, diverse group of men, and they've always kept us all very safe. We did have threats coming in from Antifa all over social media. So we asked them to attend because we had no idea, since we were going to do this as a protest, who of the police were going to show up. Of course, there was an abundance of police that arrived at the park that day, but we were very peaceful. I mean, we were very peaceful. We always have been. We've never had any problems at any of our events. So I just don't understand where all the over numbering and the emergency town hall meeting and all this. I'm from Texas. I don't know. Understand what exactly is going on here, other than being extremely biased towards a group of people.
Thank you. Perhaps, Captain, would you like to answer the question? We can start there.
Sure. We reviewed a copy of the permit that I received. I want to say it was the denial of the permit and the information I received on Friday. And then also we were basing our number of attendees off of people that had showed interest on social media. That's where I got my number of attendees estimate. And I believe total folks in the park, I believe we ended up having about 350.
Thank you. Any other, I'm sorry, go ahead, Captain.
Right, and just real quick, and the reason I did bring in so many police resources is there had been an event that had gone in Portland that did involve the Proud Boys, and Whether or not there was conflict, I was concerned and wanted to have enough resources on hand in the event that there was. As we all know, there was no crime that occurred in the park. There was no conflict. There was no, we didn't make any arrests. And so, yeah, we had those resources on standby in the event that they were necessary.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to reply on the panel? Okay, thank you.
I just wanted, can I say one more thing?
Jan, we have a lot of hands, and we're going to go through all the hands first. If we have time, then you can come back and ask another question. Thank you.
Okay.
Next person in line is Regina Bruno. Regina?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. This is so important to have this open dialogue and a chance to reconcile and heal. Many of community members feel that this is a huge loss. We feel trust has been broken. And I think it's really important for us to reconcile and do what we can to bring this back together. I feel like a huge loss. This is just a huge loss for our community and a huge win for domestic extremism and terrorism. I mean, I know I'm speaking for a lot of community members. I was at the park for the whole duration. I've been to many, many protests over the years. I'd like to talk about what is not permitted during a First Amendment demonstration, which are knives, pepper spray, flagpoles, chains, fighting words, incitement, and true threats. I have proof, excuse me, I'm fighting a little frog in my throat. I have proof all of these took place during the Proud Boys rally. I have proof of the participants with knives, pepper spray, flagpoles, and chains. I have pictures. I have video of fighting words, incitement, and true threats. I have proof of selective enforcement, clear, visible infractions that police officers chose not to enforce, a deliberate misapplication of the law by police officers. So I just feel that it's really important because we need police officers to keep us safe. So we really, really need to reconcile and heal. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Regina. I'm not sure that I actually heard a question as opposed to a comment. I don't know if anyone would like to respond.
Sure, I would like to just respond briefly.
Sure, Captain.
I had given some direction to police officers if they saw those prohibited items in the park. I handed out a list of prohibited items that are prohibited by being at First Amendment protests. They include many of the items that Ms. Lombruno had indicated, with specific directions about what to do, what to seize, when to seize them, when to effect detentions. Some detentions we did stop some folks at the park that day. I'm unaware of any seizures. I haven't seen Ms. Lombruno's videos, but I would like to. I welcome her to come in and sit down and we can discuss it further and take whatever other appropriate action she would like to see. But the door is certainly open. But I gave some very specific directions on what to do and how to do it.
Thank you, Captain. Anyone else like to make a comment? Okay, we're going to move on to the next one. Next person will be Reggie Wong. Reggie, go ahead.
Hi. I would like to know why you are referring to counter protesters as so-called Antifa and not concerned residents. Antifa is more of a state of mind. It's fighting against fascism. It's World War II veterans are Antifa. Why not call the Proud Boys terrorists? You do know that Tony Moon has admitted to being at the Capitol on January 6th. He's an insurrectionist. I'm sure some other insurrectionists were present there that day, as well as a number of residents, San Pedro residents, have taken pictures of Proud Boys carrying weapons. And may I remind you, Captain Mastic, I don't know if you were there that day or not, but the Proud Boys, they dress like the Black Bloc, which is often kind of connected to the so-called these mythical Antifa. And that's just what protesters do of either side. They cover up like that. They cover up like that. So, and I think you would make a lot of residents, you would calm a lot of residents down more, or you'd probably get on their better side if you started calling the counter protesters as concerned residents or counter protesters. Not Antifa. Antifa has a very bad connotation. It's a connotation of lawlessness, even though that's not the case. It's about fighting fascism. So I would like to know, who told you to call the counter protesters so-called Antifa? And I do want to remind you, a number of Proud Boys and people like the Proud Boys, Trump supporters, have invaded little cities like Cudahy and Huntington Park. We've had one of the Trump protesters, Arthur Shopper, arrested by Huntington police because he keeps disrupting the meetings. They have pepper sprayed kids. And there is video of that. I'll show you the video. Give me your email address. Drop it in the chat, of them pepper spraying kids, of them pulling a gun out on innocent people. So those, I mean, Captain Mastic, what? No, I appreciate that you got the numbers out there, but you needed to escort those people out of the park. And don't use that word Antifa again. It's concerned residents.
And that's time.
It's counter protesters.
That's time.
Thank you, Reggie. Any comment?
I would like to respond,
Sure.
again, just briefly. It would have been my desire just not to have two groups that were in conflict or counter protesters at all at the park. But quite frankly, I didn't have the authority to not allow the event. If it's a First Amendment event, folks have the right to assemble. Folks have the right to speak. In the event, it becomes an unlawful assembly. I had megaphones there. I had people in place to hear me give the unlawful assembly. It's called a dispersal order. Various points in the park to record me from the far end of the park giving the dispersal order, and plans in place to affect arrest circles, complete arrests, and do all those things. But I needed cause to do that. I couldn't just do that on my own without a crime or without an unlawful assembly. So again, preference. Someone had emailed me in the days before the event that they didn't want a hate group or a terror group or anything like that, or what they classified as that, to come down to their little community and hold that event. And I had a similar sentiment that I didn't want any conflict in our community. But with that, I had to have a conflict before I was able to take action on it, even though the permit was denied. And I believe in speaking with Joe Buscaino, I was pleased the permit was denied. But nevertheless, I needed a cause to take action. I couldn't just escort people off or just effect arrests without cause. So I think that probably addresses Ms. Wong's concern.
Thank you, Captain. Anyone else from the panel like to say something?
Ray, I wanted to kind of piggyback on what Captain Mastic said about what an unlawful assembly is. So in Penal Code Section 407, it actually defines an unlawful assembly so that people understand how we're defining it is when two or more people are assembled together to do an unlawful act or do a lawful act in a violent, boisterous, or tumultuous manner. So the courts have interpreted this to mean that it's conduct that poses a clear and present danger of imminent violence. So just so that people have the definition of what an unlawful assembly is.
Thank you, Sergeant. Appreciate the additional information. I think we'll go ahead and move on to the next speaker, and that will be Gwendolyn Henry. Gwen, you're up.
Hi, thank you. I would like to say that with the police presence and the possibility for volatility, that I personally am very pleased with how this event turned out, and that all parties that had concerns were able to bring the attention to the authorities, and the permitting was given that the attention that it needed. With that, what I'm hoping is that in the future, more more concern could and more attention can be put on section 5507 of our municipal code, which is the prohibition of carrying of possessing specified items while attending assemblies. In this case, I do believe that Captain Mastic will be provided documentation of illegal items, and that I'm hoping that in the future there can be more organization in ensuring that people who enter an event might have those items screened and removed from their persons before they actually are in a park. A place like Point Fermin is a community, a very peaceful community, a residential park, and there is no need for those kind of things. With that, again, like the women's marches that have occurred annually in downtown Los Angeles, all organized parties are very clear when they pass out the information that these items are prohibited. And I would suggest that in the future, the authorities and the parties, whether it's Parks and Recs or anybody else, very clearly let organizers know that they must declare these things in their promotional materials, to not have these things during First Amendment activities. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwen. Captain, would you like to respond?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for giving me the first opportunity to respond. I believe her point is exactly on point, and I believe Ms. Lambrusco had indicated something similar. I did anticipate the possibility of those things happening. I had a copy of that section printed out, and I handed it out to every police officer that was there. But I also do believe, just based on Ms. Lambrusco's concern, that she saw some of those things there. I'm not denying that she saw those things there. My direction was, if someone has these prohibited items, stop them, seize them, and if necessary, arrest them. Were some of those things brought into the park? I don't know, but I'll look through her videos and I'll take it at face value of what she has to show me. With regard to the Parks and Rec, I kind of wanted to take the onus off Parks and Rec on this and really put it more on the police department, because their answer was no. So had it been a permitted event and they had approved whatever was going to go on, I can see putting the onus on Parks and Rec to inform the party along with their permit, hey, don't bring these things into the park. But in the event, what their role was, they reviewed it, they denied the permit. That would have been more upon my organization to monitor or to enforce, more so than Parks and Rec that day.
If I could, real quick, I could ask Sergeant Holmes if this had been a permanent event, or one of those events where the Parks Department is given or has given a permit, would the rangers be tied into those things necessarily, or when and how would park rangers be given any kind of oversight of that?
Yes, and once Rec and Parks issues a permit, we're given the parameters of the permit as far as what is allowed, what is not allowed, the size, and basically we were forced to permit as is directed. So once I heard of the event, which was on Thursday, I heard that they were trying to obtain a permit and insurance. That didn't fall through. So as I found out, which I was off, that the permit was denied and that it probably wasn't going to happen. But then I found out later on that LAP were setting up a command post just in case it did arrive on scene. And we did have a ranger go by just as a park representative to monitor the event to see if there's anything that we can assist in.
Thanks very much.
Chris, I'd like to say something real quick, just in general. People are making comments and asking questions of the captain and everything in the chat. He cannot, nobody's going to be able to address your comments in the chat. You need to raise your hand and ask to speak public comment instead of making your comments in here trying to do the runaround to actually maybe get ahead of the line for your hand being raised and getting it here. Nobody's going to answer your questions in chat. You're going to have to raise your hand. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. We'll move on to the next question. I had Kathy Creighton in line, but I don't see her hand up.
She is still there. For some reason, she went down the list.
It
But
looked like she dropped down. Yeah, Kathy, since I saw your name earlier, we want to go ahead and ask your question or make your comment.
I'm here. I'm sorry. I just clumsy fingers. Okay. Thank you to everybody for doing this. I know time and evening and giving it up. We appreciate it. I'm noticing some discrepancies between the information that we got at the meeting following the event on October 21st and tonight. One of the things that happened in the week leading up to the event on the 16th in the park was this heightened uber aware of, on Facebook and all that, and everybody was freaking out, what's going on, this and that. And finally, late on Thursday, we got a statement from our councilman's office that I have screenshotted, I have sent on to you. You're aware that we were told that the event was not permitted, that would not be held. In the event that anybody did show up from the group, LAPD would be there to move them along. Okay, so of course I showed up out of curiosity and was surprised to see hundreds of people there. I snapped pictures of men carrying big guns. I'm sorry, big knives. I apologize, no guns. Signs with profanity, t-shirts being sold that had profanity, body armor, alcohol, glass. I've sent those pictures on. Nobody can pretend that they didn't see it. You've seen it now. But tonight I'm hearing that there was correspondence between our councilman's office and LAPD. So I'm curious, why was the statement made Thursday night that LAPD would move them along and then they didn't? So that's my one question. And then my other question or concern.
Kathy, if we can we just hit the one question? We have a lot of hands up and we want to make sure everyone has.
No, I have one more question. I'm sorry, everybody else gets their minute. I want to know going forward, my husband and I organize events in the park. Will people like, let's say, Light at the Lighthouse, Christian Music Festival, freedom of religion is protected just like speech. Will they be charged the $10,000 fee anymore going forward? How are you going to decide who has to pay permit fees and who doesn't?
There's a lot of questions in there.
Well,
we're going to try to make this.
why don't we let Deanne,
everyone?
let Deanne answer that question for her?
Deanne, would you like to answer the question? I guess about the fee structure and so on.
Sure, not a problem. So again, there are just differences in different types of permits, and the one you just referred to, the Light at the Lighthouse, does not fall under the public expression, First Amendment, freedom of speech permitting process, because you have amplified sound, you erect booths, you use exclusive use of the park. So those are those questions that make an event First Amendment or not within a park facility. So you would be going through our special event process, and so that's where your fees actually all come from.
Okay. I do believe there might have been some other questions stuck in there, so I don't know if anyone recalls the actual the other questions, but if looks like Captain, you're ready to respond to something there, so you want to go ahead?
Ray, I can respond.
Sure, great, thanks.
What her concern was that CD15 had come out, I believe, on social media and basically said if they appear, the Los Angeles Police Department will be there to move them along. I had talked to Joe about that. I talked about the permitting process. I wasn't pleased that two groups or one or more groups might arrive in our park to cause conflict. That concerned me as well. But to give you a straight answer about it, I don't have the authority of just moving people along in the park if they're not committing a crime. So people are allowed to arrive, people are allowed to speak, people are allowed to assemble, whether or not I agree with their message, whether or not I agree with anything they have to say or the content of their speech. I don't get to make a decision about that. If I have an unlawful assembly, I can generate a dispersal order and begin to make arrests. I can ensure that I have proper police resources on hand, and that's my role in these events. It ended up being a peaceful event, and I ended up not making any arrests that day. But I did have a significant concern about it because of the nature of it and the history of similar groups.
Thank you, Captain. We're going to go along and hit the next question. I have the next person identified as layman's terms. You want to go ahead?
Hi, sorry, I learned about this meeting last minute, so I am a little bit, I was actually out at a bar working some stuff on the laptop, so I'm sorry if it's loud in the background. I just wanted to ask the room the question, would you consider Antifa a terrorist organization? And would you, or a terrorist criminal organization? And would you consider the Proud Boys a terrorist criminal organization? I just want to know where everybody in the room, kind of what they feel about that question. I don't know if I can mute it in between.
Who would be the person that'd like to take that response?
I honestly, I'm not sure. I don't know if anyone would like to take that on. And this is just full disclaimer, just off the top of my head. I believe it is at the federal level that groups are designated, possibly at the state, but if to be designated a terror group or a hate group is probably not something that's done on an individual communities level. But again, that's just my recollection. I don't know if anyone can speak more to that than I can.
I could speak to it very briefly. If I have a crime, I can effect an arrest. If I have a crime involving a number of people, I can make an arrest. If someone is a member of a large group, if they're not committing a crime, they're allowed to speak and assemble, whether or not I agree with what their message is. So as a state police officer, a municipal police officer, I'm confined by the rules of the state of California, and those are basically based on crimes. And that's when I can take police action.
Thank you.
I appreciate that answer.
So let's go ahead and move on. Next person I have in line is Elsa Alguire. I hope I'm saying that right.
Hello.
Hi, Elsa, go ahead.
Yes, hi. My name is Elsa Aldiger, and I just wanted to. My question is, why are we getting the Proud Boys involved? This was my event. I was there to ask for permits. It was never a Proud Boys event, so I don't understand why you guys are adding the Proud Boys. In fact, let me get this straight for Captain Mastic and everyone else. This was an event put together by Latinos for Trump, Latinos United for America, and also Lexit, which is Latinos exiting the Democratic Party. So I wanted to get that straight, and I'm sorry I have an accent, but I'm from El Salvador. So I wanted to make sure that first we understand that this was not a Proud Boys event. I personally applied with someone that exaggerated the number, and I think that he didn't do it on purpose. I think that when the question was asked to him, how many people do you expect at the rallies? He actually said 1,000 people. Not exactly what we were expecting. We were expecting between 100 and 200 people, and that's pretty much what we had at the end. But I just wanted to make sure that San Pedro doesn't waste their time and energy with actually people that, follow rules, because we follow every single rule that was given to us the day of the event. And because we were not able to get the permits, we actually canceled the events and only were there to protest. And we follow every rule that was given to us. I personally spoke to Sergeant Song, which happened to be in the panel, and she can say that we were respectful to everyone. We follow every order that was given to us, and I do not understand why Latinos cannot have a protest just like everyone else. Why do we have to be labeling at Proud Boys. Can we label it the way it is? The Latinos are fed up and the Latinos are protesting instead of putting names that do not belong, like the Proud Boys. Let's get this straight, please, you know, because
And that's time.
it doesn't, I don't believe in brainwashing people.
Okay, who would like to respond to the comment?
Ray, it's Mona Sutton here.
Sure, Mona, go ahead.
If I may, I think that a lot of community members know are asking and had been asking each other's why Point Fermin. So I'd like to ask the lady that was just speaking if you can unmute her. The last question person.
I did not mute her. I'm not sure if anyone else on the panel did.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Chris. So my question is to you, Elsa.
Yes.
How did you and your group decide to pick San Pedro to come to that day?
Because believe it or not, I love San Pedro. I wanted to make this a love fest where everyone, which is blacks, whites, Asians, everyone will be welcome. And that's what we did. And we accomplished that. In San Pedro, we wanted to be as far away as possible from the terrorist organization BLM and Antifa as possible. So that's why we chose San Pedro, because we wanted to be as far away from them as possible, because we wanted a peaceful protest.
What were you invited here? Do you have ties to San Pedro? And
yes,
whose idea?
Yes, I love San Pedro. I used to live in San Pedro. I go with my family to San Pedro to Port Call once or twice every month. Since when am I not allowed? This is America. This is not China or Venezuela. What's going on?
No, I just a friendly question, nothing more. I was wondering if how you chose the San Pedro community.
I love San Pedro. That's why.
Oh, okay. Were you invited here? Did you formerly live here?
Yes, I formerly lived there. I don't need an invitation. As I said, this is not Venezuela or China. As far as I know, I'm as an American, and I became an American citizen back in the 90s. I'm free to roam anywhere I want to. Thank you.
Absolutely right. Thank you for your answer.
Anyone else like to make a comment regarding her inquiry?
So Ray, I was gonna just speak a little bit. So I wasn't actually at the event on the 16th, but I did meet Elsa in the walkthrough. And so part of the permitting process is doing a walkthrough and having conversations about the event and the number of people coming. So in terms of when we're trying to do an assessment on public safety, that's something that we do. And so, but in terms of Elsa and her counterpart that was there, they were professional, and they were trying to give as much information as possible during that particular walkthrough, which happened earlier that week. So it was before Thursday. I think it was Wednesday, or it was prior to the whenever the permit was being processed. Just for more context.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, let's move on. We have a lot of hands and some repeat people here also. So like I said earlier, I'm going to go ahead and keep going with the people who have a first question, and then I'm noticing that some other people also are coming back with additional questions. So I'll pick you up as time permits. So the next person I have on the list is Calvin Stewart. Calvin, you want to go ahead?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I just wanted to say, so I was actually there in the park that day. I was doing some photojournalism stuff, and actually want to thank Chris for letting me know about this ahead of time. But I don't want to talk so much about how the event was planned beforehand and, you know, how LAPD surveilled or is looking at social media talk, because there's only so much you can really do in terms of determining whether or not there's going to be violence. But it is worth noting that there absolutely were people there with knives there were people there, covering their faces, which I don't have anything against, but, if I think it's pretty obvious that if there was a Black Lives Matter rally where protesters were carrying knives and covering their faces, there'd be cops in riot gear there from the start. But I do just want to talk and say, like, there were, verbal threats made towards us. There was a group of journalists. We were pushed around the park until we were eventually forced to leave. The Proud Boys installed their own security who were there wearing, marked t-shirts. They were pushing people around the entire time. And I'm just wondering why LAPD didn't have any issue with this at the time.
Thank you, James. Captain?
I did get some reports around 2 p.m. that a group in sweatshirts had came up and made antagonistic comments towards another group. I never identified who the individuals were. Allegedly, after some of these comments were made, one individual from one group began to chase after another individual who ran behind a police officer and said, "You can't touch me now, the cops are here." The officers that were there said, "Break up, calm down," at which time the other group that I heard, the antagonistic group, had walked off. So I did get that report. No one had contacted anybody else. I'm certain there were some hurt feelings. I'm certain there were some challenges that may have been made on one or both sides. But ultimately, no crime. I'm not aware of a challenge to fight. But I am aware that there was a little bit of a dust up with no contact between people. Those concerned individuals were separated and then the group walked off. That was the only concern I got that day.
Thank you. Next question is coming from James. Hope I'm going to say this right. Campow. Camp now. I'm sorry if I messed up the name, but James.
Fine. Kempo. Thank you,
Thank you.
panelists. Great discussion. I appreciate it. I'm still confused, Captain Mastic, about, since it was a unlawful assembly because it wasn't permitted, why it didn't get shut down. I have that obvious question still after listening to it all. And if it was just a numbers situation that not enough people were there to determine it was an unlawful assembly, but the permit was denied. So, I mean, did you actually do a head count of how many people were there and determine that these people could stay there and do whatever they were doing there? Also, one question to Deanne Dedman. So is the permit cost, so one person called and said it was just so expensive. Is it a $10,000 cost? I heard that number go out. And does that cost cover what, extra trash, porta toilets, something like that? Or what does that cover? And does it actually cover additional city resources? Thank you, panels.
Captain, you want to answer the first part, and then Deanne, you can come up with the next piece of information?
I sure can. This is a question I've received over and over again. It is it an unlawful assembly by merely assembling in the park without a permit? And I'll just tell you, no, it's not an unlawful assembly. They're attending in a park without a permit, particularly in the event if it's a First Amendment protest event, First Amendment event. Just by that nature, it doesn't make it an unlawful assembly. I cannot make a dispersal order just based on that. We have events that go downtown all the time. I don't police those events because I work down here in the harbor area, but I will let you know that several go on a month. There are large numbers of folks. They're considered protests. They are not unlawful assemblies. They're not arrested. There's no dispersal order, and they're allowed to continue. That was no different here in San Pedro. In terms of the number, I did have an approximate number, but having too many or too few really would not have made it more of an unlawful assembly. It's more in terms of the behavior. And I think I've covered it previously. I need folks gathering together and committing a crime. And in that circumstance, I didn't have it. And merely attending at the park without a permit does not constitute a crime. And based on that, I can't call it an unlawful assembly. And with that, I'll let Deanne talk.
Sorry, I was having problems unmuting myself. As far as permit costs, kind of depending on what they're using and what they're actually going to do in the park. So a larger event could cost up to $10,000 for use of the facility. The setup costs, depending on what they're doing, what they need our maintenance staff there for. Usually when they pull in, when they leave, so they're not breaking sprinkler heads or damaging things on the park. If they need to bring in dumpsters, porta toilets, those types of things. Depending on how large the event is, what the event is, we'll also ask for security, depending on how long the event is, right? So those types of things, but it covers quite a bit of different resources that are provided at the park. That answers your question.
Thank you. Next is Celia Gonzalez. You want to go ahead, Celia?
Yes, thank you. I wrote mine out. Please bear with me. I try to be coherent. And it's just a comment, gratitude. Thank you, Melanie Lebret, Captain Maskin, all the panel members, visitors. Thank you for this meeting. As a lifetime resident of San Pedro and a longtime resident of the Point Fermin community, I'm one of many, many people who are grateful for law enforcement presence that was affected at Point Fermin Park that day in October. This area is a vibrant, multicultural community and attracts visitors from the greater county of Los Angeles, as well as out of state and literally from around the world. Knowing how attractive the park area is to all walks of life who visit here to enjoy basking in our truly lovely weather, it was shocking to learn what kind of group was interested in having an event here. There was steady updates on social media, as well as the event poster being forwarded, so we knew what to expect. Despite that event being supposedly relocated to another city when a permit was refused, then they arrived for the day anyway. It was appreciated that an abundant police presence was here. It was one of the quietest Sundays we had on a sunny day that wasn't one of the chilliest days out here in February or March. Thank you for being a part of making San Pedro a genuine little piece of paradise at the very end of the Harbor Freeway. In closing, it's too bad that the source of security that was chosen to quote unquote guard the event with the types of personal armament that they opted to outfit themselves with, all the protestations of the event organizers can change the opinion of the residents who were counseled to remain away from the park. So there was less chance of it becoming an us versus them scenario that could devolve into something less than the peaceful gathering everyone hoped it would be once it was acknowledged the group was having their gathering anyway. Thank you all sincerely from the bottom of my heart. My gratitude and that of my neighbors is sincere. Thank you very much, everybody, for organizing this meeting. It's very important. It answers a lot of questions. And I, for one, am somebody who waves at our law enforcement with all 5 fingers, and I don't care how grumpy they look as they go by. Everybody gets love that comes out here because we have so much action between the beach, the cliffs, the parks. You know what it's like out here. Thank you all for looking out for us and for organizing meetings like this. Thank you for allowing me my moment to speak. I appreciate it.
Thank you for the comments, Celia. I'm not sure if there's a response that's needed to that, but in the essence of time and the many hands that I see up, I'm going to go along and move on to the next question. And the next person I have listed here is Mario Presents. Mario, you want to go ahead?
Good evening, panel. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Mario Presents. I was there actually as an attendee and ultimately was asked to speak. I'm a gay Hispanic content creator, and I was verbally assaulted by previous caller Calvin Stewart, dressed in all black, as I arrived and passed out my business cards. I myself had conversations with concerned residents at the onset of the event who inched closer over the day to listen to the speakers. It's what I do. It's in my name. Presents. Thank you, officers, for your protection that day, because there's people like me and some of your previous callers who want nothing more than to ruin the livelihoods of others through doxing. Not allowing alleged journalists who make claims of bodily harm to others is a tactic that protects the normal people who want to enjoy an afternoon in the park together. I myself have had my address posted on the Los Angeles freeway overpasses, claiming me to be a Proud Boy. I'm not one, but I know firsthand of their protective nature. When I see black and yellow, I know that I'm going to be safe. Understanding this, do you feel the resources spent were appropriate or were they overkill?
Thank you. I'm gonna guess, Captain, would you like to respond to that?
I would guess that the resources spent were appropriate. During the day, we did monitor social media. We did follow several public posters who had indicated, quote, "The cops are all over this place. It's not worth coming today." And with my concern about the possibility that it may erupt into violence, no, I don't have a concern about the deployment. I don't have a concern about the expenditure of resources. I am personally pleased with what I had brought to the park that day, and I believe it had a very positive impact on maintaining public safety. If I had dialed it down a little bit, if I had dialed it down up a little bit, would it have more or less of an impact? I am pleased of the impact that it had, and I do believe that it kept the peace that day in the park. So I don't have a concern about what I brought out that day.
Thank you.
Ray, if I may just because
Joanna.
I have to jump off the meeting, out of the meeting, but my name is Joanna Rodriguez and I am the Harbor and Watch representative. First off, just want to thank the neighborhood council, Mona, and everyone just for putting this meeting together and really just allowing for Parks and Recs, LAPD to go over really important topics, especially over permitting procedures, the First Amendment, and just allowing for a Q&A. But as a representative for the mayor's office in the harbor area, I do want to just say that we fully support LAPD and the captain's actions, really to his actions and really just the precautionary steps to make sure that everyone in San Pedro was safe. So I know there were some questions, but I do just want to give kudos to the captain for always making sure that our residents in San Pedro are safe. And so I just wanted to say that just because I do have to jump off. Chris, I know I tried to give you a call, but I will follow up in case there's any questions, as well as Ray. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Joanna. So I think the next person I was getting ready to call is Joe Diaz. Joe, go ahead.
Hi, good evening, panel. How are you guys doing? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Well, I just want to let you guys know, I was one of the ones, I work locally, and I'm also a small business owner. And I saw the flyers going around, and I saw good flyers, one that said Love Fest, and there's going to be bands and special appearances and stuff. And then I also saw other flyers that were going around that portrayed the whole event to just be a huge, like just absolute chaos. I happened to be in the area, and I was doing work, and I finished the job that I was at. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to just stop by and just check it out myself. And to be honest with you, I saw a pretty wide range, diverse crowd there. And like the flyers that were going around, I'm pretty sure you guys have seen them. Captain, I'm pretty sure you've seen the flyers portraying all them to be racist and whatever the hell else going on. There was African Americans there, Hispanics. I'm part Hispanic myself. There's Polynesians there. There's a wide range of people there. I got no sense in any sense that there was any kind of threatening behavior or that my life was at risk or anything like that. Matter of fact, they, when I walked by, they, greeted me with a soda pop, and they went up on stage. I saw gathered around prayer and stuff like that, and we're just talking about current events that were going on, the same token, I mean, I think we can also agree too that, you know, as much as everybody's trying to portray, you know, the Proud Boys as being these bad people, we also have to really take a look at, you know, Antifa also. You know, I think, you know, everybody's looking at this whole Portland incident. I mean, the Antifa has a far more prosperous and prestigious record of violence and rioting and murder and stuff like that, you know. And that's not what I got at all when I was present there. I thought it was a pretty peaceful congregation there. And you know, and they can say whatever else. I saw, you know, guys driving by throwing gang signs up at these people and, you know, threatening local members of the community. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone want to comment? No? Okay. We'll go ahead and move on. Next person I have listed is Steve Caceres. Steve?
Hi. I just wanted to, I think the reason why so many people are upset is that a lot of people see the Proud Boys as domestic terrorists, despite the fact they don't have that official recognition, at least in the United States. In Canada, they are. So on an international level, the Proud Boys are seen as a terrorist organization. Additionally, if you want to see in their own words how horrible they are, all you have to do is go to the Southern Poverty Law Center website, and in their own words, you can see how horrible they are. And I think that one of the reasons why some people are upset is because there's a disconnect between what they want to see done to domestic terrorists and what can be done currently, because since they have not been designated as a hate group or a terrorist organization, there's not much they can do. And thus, for a lot of people saying they're just there to protest and they're just there for freedom of speech, it's rather insulting, especially saying the deep connections they have with the insurrection on January 6th. So it's very disconcerting to hear so many people so positive and so defensive of these people. And it makes me realize there's a lot of people, probably a lot of people in town that I can no longer trust. And that's the real concern for a lot of people here in San Pedro, is that we have people who are, we have, again, years of information on them, and that's the situation. So I think there's a huge disconnect between what people feel and what is actually happening and what can be done. Now, we don't have any federal designation yet, but maybe it's something we can do locally. What are the steps we would have to take to designate this group to fall under RICO or some other overarching like legalization where law enforcement can see them as a threat by just existing? We've done this for gang members. We've done this for other violent organized criminal organizations. I want to know what the steps are to do something like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Anyone want to comment? Captain, I see you unmuting. Go ahead.
Ray, I sure can. A few points. He brought up a whole lot of points. I think his analysis of it, of what has the community concerned, is absolutely right on the nose. I believe there's a concern about that, a concern they could come back, a concern that they were even allowed to go there to begin with. With that, I'm going to come back to the First Amendment issue. Unless I have them committing a crime right then and there, I can't prohibit their speech and I can't prohibit their assembly unless they're committing a crime. With regard to RICO, there is a law in the books. It's a federal law. It's not a state law. Mm-hmm. And that goes to an organization, a criminal organization that commits in plans. It's a law that's used to enforce crimes against the mafia and criminal organizations of really a large nature. With gang injunctions, that's an interesting avenue to tackle. It might be interesting to see where that went, but right now the city attorney, we're not doing gang injunctions because we haven't probably done gang injunctions in the city, certainly in Harbor area, in probably 5 years plus. So a way to tackle that would have been, it's a civil injunction that says certain identified people cannot meet together because of their propensity for criminal activity. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to use those against our Harbor area gangs in some time, But that might have been an interesting tool to tackle this. But right now, that's not a tool that's available to Los Angeles Police Department at this point. But I will say, to Steve's point, what the community is concerned, and he hit it squarely on the nose. I think that's why we have such a huge participation this evening is, hey, why were they allowed to go to begin with? And why they were allowed to assemble in our park, particularly if they hadn't received that permit that Parks and Rec hadn't granted. But I've gone over it a couple of times. Unless I have an unlawful assembly, I'm unable to arrest people and kick people out of a park. So, but I think Steve has his analysis of the problem is right on the money.
Thank you, Captain. I'm going to go ahead and call on the next person, and that is Pat. Pat, you're up.
Two questions, one for the captain and one for Ms. Dedman. It's true that you have the right to peacefully assemble and for free speech and so forth. The government has the right to regulate time, place, and manner. In fact, the city of Los Angeles has been before the Supreme Court a number of times on that very issue. So I'm pretty sure that Rec and Parks probably has some guidelines on how to analyze these things. And if you do, can we get a copy of the guidelines that you use to analyze whether an event can take place in a public park? That would be the question for you. And for Captain Mesnick, I wonder, had I been in the park that day for a picnic with my family and I went to you and said, these people are violating the city's municipal noise ordinance, or they're disturbing my peace and quiet, what would your instructions have been to your officers?
Captain, I believe that could be
Sure,
answered.
I could take that one first. For disturbing the peace on a, I believe it was a Saturday afternoon, open in the park. If people play a radio in the park, they can play a radio in the park. They can have their family out there. So disturbing the peace is somewhat of a relative issue. If you have a group out, even that's a little relative right now. But if you had a group out in the middle of the night playing loud radio, your neighbor playing a loud radio in the middle of the night, and you call the police out there, we're more inclined to make a citation or cite them for a loud party than a Saturday afternoon in the park if somebody's playing a radio. So it is kind of contextual. If there was something that was really was over the top, that was impeding somebody else's peace, if something threatening of that nature, and you had the police officers right there, I'm sure the very first step we would have done was warn them and ask them to move away. Can you go to that corner of the park? Can you move 25 feet away? Can we both work to get along in this space that's somewhat limited? My first step would have been an attempt to work it out. And then if there was some kind of threat, if there was some kind of crime, then take some kind of more severe action.
Thank you, Captain. Anyone else like to make a comment on
Well,
the?
Deanna Brendan, I wanted an answer from her about Rec and Parks time, place, and manner regulations. If it's in writing, if we can get a set of those.
Sure. So basically for events, depending on the size of the event and what they want to do, right, we just follow municipal code. So if it's the sound regulations, if it's the time of the event, we have different times that parks can be open, when things need to end and close. And then we do have capacities for our parks, and we use LAFD and their division to actually come out and tell us what capacities are at parks. Point Fermin is actually a little bit different as well because it's on a cliff. We also have some weight requirements at Point Fermin Park as well. So you'll never see like a large carnival or those types of things there. So just because of that, but we use just our municipal codes, and then we have LAFD that will come and actually give us what our max capacities are at parks depending on space. So there really isn't anything like a rules in writing type of thing. It's more municipal codes and then just size and space.
Okay, thank you. We're going to go ahead and move on to the next individual, and that's Bill Roberson. Bill, go ahead.
All right, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, and kind of following up on Pat's questions and Deanne's, response. From a public education point of view, and thank you very much, folks. You've been very educating tonight. But I think that if the city would put out a little handbook, maybe just a 2-page flyer that educates groups about to put on an event, or groups that meet and talk about events, whether they ever get around to putting them on or not, so that they're informed in general about what constitutes a First Amendment gathering of their group or maybe opposing political groups. One of the things I think we should anticipate, much like the next pandemic, is the fact that more people and more groups are getting out and exercising their First Amendment rights. And that's going to put opposing groups against each other. So in addition to maybe putting out a pamphlet on what goes and what doesn't go, provide us with some telephone, text, email contacts, so we citizens can alert you guys to something that we hear about, whether it's talk of the town, social media, or what. Okay, that's my question for all.
Thank you. Not sure who would be the appropriate person, but it sounded like a reasonable request. Anyone like to answer?
I can kind of start. I know for our department, we actually have application forms that kind of show you and lead you down the right path. So those are all posted online. And then, sorry, Bill, what would, I forgot what I was going to say, but phone numbers and contacts. So we also do have that. I don't know what would be the best way to get that out. Melanie, maybe you could send, I'm not real sure, but we can give you an email contact and then phone numbers to our region office as well, if that would be helpful.
Okay.
And Ray, if I could just chime in briefly,
Sure.
with regard to Los Angeles Police Department, when big events like this are planned or we get information about them, we do have social media here at Harbor, and also we've got a senior lead program. There's a police officer that's assigned to every area here at Harbor, 3 police officers for San Pedro, 3 for Wilmington, a police officer in the Gateway, and a police officer in Harbor City. Those are our senior lead officers in the senior lead program, and we can reach out with good contact numbers for them. Because I do, as in this case and in future cases, any intelligence we can get so it can be an event and not an incident, so I can have the opportunity to plan for these kind of events. It's clear that not everybody in the community is 100% pleased with the department's response, but nevertheless, we did have time to plan and bring resources from all over the city to our little corner of the world. And I believe that that's what kept it safe that day. So to Bill's point, anything you have along those lines, information about that, I would like to know about.
And I would like to point out real briefly, Bill, we do have Northwest Senior Lead Officer Dan Brown is in attendance, as well as a couple other senior lead officers. I guess you guys can't see each other, but this is a type of conversation and exchange will happen at our monthly board and stakeholder meetings, also in public safety committees. So just to throw a little plug in for neighborhood councils, this is the sort of forum where we'd like people to be able to come in from the neighborhoods and speak directly to senior lead officers and sometimes receive presentations from agencies and things like that. We would like to make this sort of thing more normalized and more regular, that people don't have to attend all the meetings, but this is a good place to start when you have those kinds of questions and observations, and we do them every month. So.
And Melanie, like I could actually, and Ray, and Chris, I can send you, we have to update our senior lead officer maps since we had a couple of changes that are going into the next few weeks. So as soon as I get the most updated senior lead officer map, I can send it. So it has their phone numbers, email addresses.
Find somebody for Northwest. You haven't signed somebody in Dan's place then?
So at this point, I'm actually going to be putting Chris Ike in Northwest, because I know a lot of folks are familiar with him. And given like staffing, I'm basically kind of reconfiguring, and he had been a prior acting SLO in Coastal, so he knows a lot of the different things and tools that are available to him. So you'll be seeing him starting like mid-December.
Okay.
But yeah, I did ask the senior lead officers to jump onto this particular call if they're available, especially the San Pedro SLOs, just because, you know, as was said by Steve before, you know, we are seeing more, pop-up protests or rallies and events that do happen. And so, and you may have one in Wilmington or Harbor Gateway or Harbor City. And so we definitely wanted to sit here and hear from community, because it's very helpful for us to kind of look at an event or something that happens and have that open flow of communication. So we definitely appreciate the venue that you provided for us. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on. Rosemary Ochoa, you're up. Rosemary, if you could, there you go.
There you go.
Nope, you're muted again. Rosemary, if you can unmute yourself. Or
sometimes the commands take a couple of seconds to go through. I'm going to click ask. Okay, there you go.
Can you hear me now?
There you
yes.
go.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you now, Rosemary. Hello, Rosemary, can you hear us?
We can hear you.
Rosemary, there you go. We can hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay, you can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, my question was, is it legal to carry a legal pocket knife or a flag that's on a post? Is it legal on a pole? Is it legal on a short pole? Is that legal in an event like that?
Permitted or non-permitted?
Permitted or not permitted?
Okay. Thank you for the question. Captain?
Rosemary, I'd have to take a look at the size of the pole and also the size of the knife to give you a real answer about that. And I'd also have to review 5507 myself. But certain pole lengths at protests are prohibited, and certain knives are prohibited, but I have to review it myself to tell you the exact length and size and weight and things of that nature.
Okay, however, if it was deemed permitted, a legal knife, you can carry it to an event like that. Is that correct?
I don't know. I'd have to look at the knife and look at the code to give you a real specific answer about that. I can take, just for example, at protests, and we're really going back to kind of old school labor protests from like the 70s. Certain sticks were used for the signs that folks would put up. And ultimately, when negotiations would break down and it would erupt into a fight, those sticks would be used as weapons where they're hitting each other with them. So they designated certain real thin pieces of wood that could be used for pickets and protests and things of that nature. So it does go into some detail, but I'll tell you, even myself, I'd have to review it firsthand to tell you if it met the criteria or not.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. And just you can check it out yourself if you like. It's 5507 of the LA Municipal Code.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to the next individual, and that's Arturo Garcia Ayala. You're up.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Arturo Garcia Ayala. I was the frontal journalist working for Random Links there at that day. And I can pretty much verify everything that Captain Massey says about the conduct of his officers, at least on the ground, and somewhat to what the event organizers were also trying to convey. Now, here's one thing I wanted to add, they hired the Proud Boys to be security. Why was there a group called Ruth Koreans there acting as security instead. And also another thing though is, unless you have military background, I know there is a specific list of things that are considered illegal, prohibited weapons. What are the LAPD's guidelines for gauntlets? Because gauntlets. Yes, because when I was in the infantry, and this is like in the war on terror, there was a new glove by Oakley that had a plastic covering, which granted it doesn't violate the Geneva Convention because these are not brass knuckles, but the plastic is hard enough where in a fist fight, it would give you an extra boost of impact. What are the LAPD's guidelines when it comes to consider gauntlets as weapons? Because if you look at all the pictures that I took, they had body armor, yes. I didn't see any knives, but I did see gauntlets.
Okay, Captain, would you like to take a stab at the answer?
I sure can. I'm not aware of anything in 5507 regarding gauntlets. I do know what you're talking about. I have seen it on the Oakley website. To give a little context, it would be something similar to like brass knuckles. It would be something similar to make a punch more of a serious threat or a deadly threat. But I don't believe that appears in 5507 as a prohibited item at a protest like that. There are SAP gloves that are, I believe, prohibited items, not under 5507, but under a different section in the California Penal Code. It's similar to like a blackjack or a SAP, something like that. So I think SAP gloves might be covered, but I'm not aware of anything about gauntlets or specifically those Oakley gloves that you were talking about. And I did see folks wearing gloves that day myself.
Captain, as far as the pull length is concerned.
Arturo, we have a lot of questions. We're going to have to move on to the next one. If you'd like to raise your hand up again, we'll try to get to repeat the questions down the line, given the time. Thank you, Arturo. I'd like to move on to Xavier Hermosillo. Xavier?
Hi there. You know, as I've been listening to this, I come away with 3 or 4 things, one of which really, really bothers me. This event occurred in the Coastal District, and this is the Northwest District, discussing and criticizing something that occurred, obviously, you know, in the town that I was born and raised in and lived here all my life. But I'm really concerned about the dialogue between Mona and Elsa. She kept asking her, why did you come to San Pedro? And you know what? We can go anywhere we want. And I sense sometimes in these discussions an undercurrent, a racial undercurrent. And I would remind Mona that San Pedro is 50% Latino and Wilmington is 87% Latino. And so that should never be an issue. That's a separate issue from the Proud Boys or anybody else. And on any Saturday, Sunday, Wednesday, whatever, because I walk that area, my wife and I do, because we live in the Coastal District. One of my brothers lives right there, right off of Point Fermin. And, you know, I see car clubs from out of town, others, all colors, and they're playing music loud and everything else. And once in a while, somebody will complain. But to question somebody's right to, and we don't know authoritatively when or why or how the Proud Boys got into this thing. They're known for crashing events, you know, to get attention, etc. And I just want to be really clear that, you know, we need to separate the right to assemble, the legal right to assemble of a group like Lexit and some of the others. I'm familiar with those groups, having been a lifelong Latino Republican, that, you know, we should never, Ray and Captain, in this kind of a dialogue, get into questioning, you know, people's ethnicity and why are you in this town? Why did you come here? That's none of our damn business. We can go anywhere we want. And I thought, I guess mistakenly, that we were beyond that. And I hope that in future dialogues that's not going to be an issue. it sounds to me, based on my experience and the information that I've had, that these guys decided they were going to come and crash this event and try to portray themselves as being conservative and Republican, because they do that elsewhere. They've done that all over the country, and I just want to make sure that we don't. And Ray, I know it's tough moderating, a thing like this, but when somebody says something like that and starts questioning somebody's right to assemble on themselves, why are you doing San Pedro? Where do you live? What are you doing from here from Cudahy?
And that's
not
time.
your damn business. Okay. End of my point. Can I get a response from?
I'm not sure who would like to respond to that.
Well, actually, if I may, Ray.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's Mona Sutton. And, to your point, I'm glad you asked that question. Part of my role as a community advocate is I take questions from people all over San Pedro and the harbor area. And inquiring minds have wanted to know, and that's exactly what I said. It wasn't a racial statement. You can question where I sit all you want, but it was only a representative question as to how all the groups decided to come to San Pedro. It was a probative question and nothing more. But I want to say, thank you, Xavier, for asking that question. Anybody that knows me in San Pedro knows that it wasn't a racial question by any means. So I'm glad you jumped on. And thank you.
Kept probing. The way you kept probing, well, why did you come here? And would you live here? She said I used to live here. But then why did you come here? Well,
because there was
that's
Xavier.
Xavier, let her answer so we can move on.
Yeah, thank you, Xavier. It was probative because so many folks were questioning and troubled by why San Pedro. So I think the question still remains as to the timing and why San Pedro. Nothing more than a probative, but thank you again, Xavier. And again, I'm not a racist. I love all people equally. So thank you. I really mean it.
Yeah, I didn't say you were.
I'm glad you jumped on the meeting tonight, and I appreciate you.
Look,
we're going to go ahead and move on now. Next person will be Bob Milling. Bob, go ahead.
Hey guys, thank you so much for taking my call. I think I'm calling into a radio show. Northwest Council, thank you so much. I'm amazed but not surprised that Coastal didn't step up and take care of this, and pretty stupefied, but thanks for doing this so much. I think we all know that Point Fermin Park is unique within the city of Los Angeles, and how it actually serves so much of Los Angeles. And any weekend you will find it filled with bouncy houses, people of all colors enjoying our park, as well as people walking dogs. So there is a question in our community. It's like, how did we, I've been out here 20 years and I've never seen any kind of event even remotely close to being like this being held out here. And how did this group, which is a right-wing political event, end up in our park? And I think the concern for us isn't even so much that they're having the event. It's actually, we were concerned about the response to the event that could potentially happen. And I don't think it's a threat or an issue that can be discounted. I mean, the members that attending it, and I didn't go because I was told not to go, so I followed what people recommended. And I live just a block away. I'm actually one of the few people here that actually live in Point Fermin. I'm one of the founders of the Point Fermin Neighborhood Watch Group. We were really concerned about the potential for violence in our small park and in our community. And that was our really deep concern, was that, hey, these guys have a right to speak and do this thing, but what they might attract could be something worse than what they're doing. And granted, they're actually chanting F the president in one breath, praying the next minute while flying flags that say F the president in a family park that's tiny. So I think we've got, and I don't even know if I necessarily have a question, perhaps someone wants to comment. And I think, I don't know how an event of this nature is actually being held in a park where it's antithetical to the traditional use of the park, as well as I think the issue is what is the weight between public safety and the First Amendment on this issue? And maybe it's a rhetorical question, it's already been answered, but that's kind of my thoughts. So thanks again, you guys. I hope you all have a good night.
Thank you, Bob. Looks like Captain, you might be unmuted. You want to go ahead and take the shot?
I sure can. I think Bob's concerns are well-founded. I will tell you, in the week leading up to the park, to the event at the park, I had very, very similar concerns. I didn't know what had attracted the group down there. That really wasn't a question for me to field. It was really more along the lines of what's the appropriate response to that. So I didn't know what brought the group down. But with that, with the city of LA and the city's position on First Amendment events, and this is not the J Mastic opinion, this is the city of LA and Los Angeles Police Department's opinion. The city of LA permits free speech, and the city of LA permits free assembly, and basically regardless of political stripe. So taking all my personal opinions out of everything, I was posed with exactly your concern, probably at about Sunday, the week before, when I first saw that Love Fest flyer. And from my position, I said to myself, what's the best public safety position? And what's the best planning I can do at this phase to keep our community safe? But I could tell you, not knowing whether the permit would be approved, but if they showed up anyway. In fact, I had this very conversation on Friday morning with a community member. I just told him, I said, I'm planning on the group showing up anyway. If they show up and I'm not ready, I don't know what's going to happen. I could have one or two or more groups in conflict, and I need appropriate resources to police the event. I also didn't want to take kind of too much of a militaristic, too much of a antagonistic position for the Los Angeles Police Department. I know we've had some events that have gone great. I know we've had some events that have gone badly. So the way I ended up working myself through the problem and working our community through the problem was bringing in a great deal of police resources, instead of being in helmets and batons and in squad formations, really to have what I amounted to a large number of police officers walking in pairs in a foot beat in Point Fermin. And it was a lot. I wanted ownership of the park, and I wanted to keep the place safe. The way I chose to accomplish that was by bringing in a whole lot of resources, but also not by taking an antagonistic view with either group, kind of keeping them in check, kind of heavily policing it, making detentions as the situation drove. We had good cause to stop somebody, we'd stop somebody. If we had good cause to arrest somebody, we would have arrested somebody. We didn't arrest anybody that day. I didn't cite anybody that day. So I think your concerns are also well-founded. But I'll also let you know that's the position of the Los Angeles Police Department. It's the position of the city of Los Angeles to permit free speech, to permit free assembly. As Deanne had mentioned previously about First Amendment protests, First Amendment events, yet they're not permitted. You don't need a permit to do those kind of things. And I don't have the authority to shut them down without cause, without a crime. So Bob, I think your analysis is also right on the money, and I had exactly the same concerns you did.
Thank you. We're going to move on to the next person asking the question, and that's Lori Jacobs. Lori, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Regalado. Thank you to LAPD. Okay, to err on the side of caution is the way to go. I've been to many protests, the Women's March, 100,000 people, no violence, okay? But you're dealing with a group that has a reputation for aggressive behavior, insurrection. To call an event a love fest by a group that actually promotes hatred and bigotry, okay, doesn't make any sense to me. So you had very good concerns, Captain, to err on the side of caution and have enough officers there. I have no idea why anybody would complain why there were too many officers there to protect you. You did your job. Now, I heard the message, don't go down there, don't antagonize them. So I didn't. It created a curiosity, okay, but not enough to put myself in danger or to interrupt any efforts that the police were doing to try and keep us safe. So I appreciate that. My questions, I think, are more around the messaging. I used to be on the board of the neighborhood council. I'm involved with trying to keep the public informed on what's going on. What's the right way to let the community know we have a potential situation without like scaring the daylights out of them? Okay, there's got to be that balance of we have a situation that may escalate. We're letting you know in advance. Or does that advance notice actually create more crazy looky-loos who like to chase fires show up? So where neighborhood councils and other organizations that keep the public informed, where's the balance? How do we message it to keep people safe, you know, and how does the police department get the message out to groups who can help promote whatever it is you want to do or say? I'm totally not articulating this, but you get the gist.
Thank you, Lori. Captain, perhaps?
Thank you, Lori. The way we like to do business when it comes to public communications and public relations, just real matter of fact. So it would be, the department was notified about this event. This is the nature of the event. This is the anticipated group. I wouldn't spin it one way or the other, as if it's going to be violent, not going to be violent, going to be what this group is, what that group is. If they self-announced and self-labeled themselves a group, I wouldn't mind saying this group has indicated that they plan on holding an event, and you can kind of do your own research on the nature of that group or your opinion of that group. I wouldn't impact your understanding of that group. Now, on my own, I would do my own research. We would monitor social media. We've got groups in the Joint Terrorism Task Force. I've also got Major Crimes Division. And then through Communications Division, we call it the Real-Time Crime Analysis Detail. And they monitor social media. And I mean, probably that Thursday night, I probably got that same flyer, that Love Fest flyer, and then the West LA flyer, and then the Culver City flyer. I probably received about 45 different copies of it from about 6 o'clock at night till about 10 o'clock on that Thursday night. So we do get a great deal of information. It all gets funneled to me. And when it comes to us, like I said, when it comes to us, to the community, I'm going to be very, very matter of fact. When it comes to us internally to the police department, I'm going to do a real-time crime, or not crime, but real-time situation size up to see what kind of resources we need, and then echo that to my bosses, and then try and bring the appropriate amount of resources that I think we need to the problem to properly police the event. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you, Captain. I'm going to move on to the next person, and James Beza. You're up. Go ahead. Hello, James. You are still muted. All right.
Good afternoon, Ray. How are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
So I don't want to be redundant or anything, but I want to just get down to basic, concise facts. It seems that our community is being put under the pressure from outside influences and groups. And, you know, part of the problem here is what can we do to mitigate this? Any adverse effect that it's having on our community. And sorry, I'm flipping through my notes here. What are our options while adhering to the letter of the Constitution, but also maintaining the spirit of the Constitution, and also guaranteeing public safety for our community? I would like to know what the current approach is to this conundrum, and what the difficulties are in our current civic environment. I mean, where are we? What does tomorrow bring, the next week, the week after, the week after? And I'll take an answer from anybody. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Who would like to take a try at this, answering the question from James? Anyone? Okay, James, thank you for the question. We're gonna go ahead and move on.
Yeah, that was disappointing. Wow. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Next person we're gonna go to is Anthony's Note 20 Ultra. Anthony, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay. I also was at that event that day. I'm a Hispanic male, and I also know quite a few Proud Boys. I can tell you that none of you have ever spoke to a Proud Boy. None of you know any of them. You don't know what they're about. All you know is what is told to you by our mainstream media. I've been at events before where the event was perfectly fine until groups like Black Lives Matter and Antifa showed up. And had the Proud Boys not engaged with them, then the event that was a peaceful event would have been destroyed. There were 2 flyers for this event that happened in Pedro. One was a Love Fest flyer put up by Lexit explaining that this was supposed to be a peaceful event. Everyone was going to go and use our First Amendment rights. The second flyer was put out by left-wing group like Antifa, basically calling it a white supremacist gang. Neo-Nazi fascism was going to be in San Pedro. I wish all these people who said that they were in fear for their lives to go down there, I wish they would have went down there. Then they would have seen blacks, whites, yellows, Asians. Proud Boys have all ethnicities, sexual orientations, period. The event went off without a hitch, and I'm sure the captain there got full reports about the event. I'm sure the captain read all the events. You had that one guy saying that he was an independent journalist that was down there because the reason why people are masked is because groups like Antifa and Black Lives Matter tried to dox Proud Boys. And you had a guy named Mario that was on there who's a gay man, Hispanic, and he's been doxxed and harassed by Antifa. The bottom line is that the event, the reason why it was held in San Pedro is because there are a lot of conservatives in San Pedro, and a lot of people wanted this event to happen. But you guys, none of you here and nobody listening knows any Proud Boys. You don't talk to any of them. So how would you know what they're about? You only know what you've been told by the media, period. You've only been shown you've only seen what you've been shown by the media. But I can tell you right now that any of you and all of you are safer at a Proud Boys event with a Black Lives Matter flag than you ever will be at a Black Lives Matter event with a fucking American flag.
And that is time. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Appreciate the comments. I'm not sure if there's an actual response that anyone would like to give. So we're going to go on to the next individual, and that'll be identified as CM. CM, you are now, go ahead.
I'm clicking ask to unmute, but I only do it every couple of seconds because sometimes they cancel each other out. So try and unmute.
There you go. We can hear you.
Okay. Hi, good evening. Yes, I'm calling in. I'm also one of the organizers of the event, and I am with Latinos United for America and Latinos for Trump. I've heard many of the comments, and I don't need to rehash much of what was said, although I do subscribe to many of the things that were said. I'm very curious and why there is such an offensive nature to the need for this town hall where this alarmist context was created. Again, as Elsa stated, this was not a Proud Boys event. And so the fact that this is continuing to go on the way it is in the alarmist nature that it is, really, it doesn't seem fitting to me at all. The proof is in the pudding. Captain Mastic has said it clearly several times, as have other callers and attendees, that the event was a peaceful event. It was promoted as a peaceful event, and the event went off as a peaceful event. We followed every rule. We had very amicable relations with law enforcement that was present. And we definitely made sure that to respect the law enforcement and what they asked of us, as well as they also respected us. And I really want to commend them, because I felt like law enforcement did a very good job between our own security that was there, plus law enforcement. They did a good job to make sure that any agitators that showed up were not going to come. There was like a boundary line, right? So they kept them at bay. Mind you, there were definite agitators. The proof again is in the pudding, and you can look at the difference between the flyers and what was promoted by us for what the event was truly about, versus the very aggressive, negative, defamatory rhetoric that is on the counter protest flyers, which were created by Antifa and circulated on Antifa social media websites and Antifa associated social media websites. So these were not concerned residents, as somebody had said in the beginning. This was a direct counter protest attempt to agitate the event and turn it into something that it was not meant to be. And it was circulated directly on their websites. They self-identify as Antifa, as evidenced by what the name of their social media websites.
And that is time.
Ray, I'll respond to her. The reason why this town hall happened is because there was what's called a community advisory board meeting that happens every month for stakeholders or residents that live in San Pedro that they go to, and it brings up concerns for the community. When that happened, there was a lot of concerns about this event that took place and a lot of questions that the community did not get answered. We are a neighborhood council that is sponsoring this, along with partnership with Harbor Station and with CPAB, because the stakeholders asked for it. The residents of San Pedro asked for it so that they could get more of their questions answered and get more information. This is an information town hall. It's not to point fingers at anybody. It's for people to get information and understand exactly what happened and go forward from here. Thank you.
Ma'am, this information has been answered clearly.
CM.
But that's time.
I think Captain, I see that you're unmuted. Did you want to respond? And I also see Sergeant Song, who may want to respond too.
Just very briefly, Ray. So for CM, it was a community concern. It was a community concern. I can tell you, I'm a public official. Clearly some community members and some special interest groups had some concerns for me. So alarmist, not alarmist, it was a healthy forum to get the information out and a positive Q&A to give me and others a chance to address community concerns. So in terms of that alone, that's why the event was held. People are going to have their own opinions about it, and they have the right to do that. But the purpose of the meeting was to really to get information and address concerns. And I think Melanie addressed that well. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain.
Yeah.
Sergeant,
Yes.
go ahead.
And yes. But yeah, I wanted to thank the Northwest Neighborhood Council for reaching out to us, because at our community police advisory board meetings, they're more focused on public safety issues within the harbor area. And so what we found at the meeting that was directly after the October 16th protest rally was there were a lot of people who wanted to voice their concerns and their thoughts on what occurred. And we realized that in the scope of our community police advisory board meeting, that we needed to do something separate to give more time to people and their thoughts, and also to provide subject matter experts who can kind of speak to the permitting process and the fact that there are different types of permitting, and just to address a lot of the things that were coming up. And so, but yeah, I just wanted to thank the Northwest Neighborhood Council for doing that. And I also wanted to touch on James Baeza's question, which was, I think his questions were so expansive. And are difficult to answer because really, you know, you think about processes because basically you're asking how can we look at there's different pieces and agencies that have different parts of First Amendment events, right? And so, and this is where I encourage people to join our Community Police Advisory Board meetings. So our next one's going to be in January. It's always the third Thursday of the month. And we've been doing it virtually. And so, you know, one of the things that as a CPAB, so separate from the neighborhood council, the CPAB is an advisory board. These are the types of things that as a CPAB, we can look at and say, how can we improve the process, you know, within at least with First Amendment, like special events that are through the Bureau of Police Commissions, right? So, so these are certain things that why we're doing this town hall is to kind of bring up some things and maybe do some takeaways and like have some action items where maybe at the Harbor CPAB, and if Mona and James support it, is to like create committees to look at certain public safety concerns, you know? So these are kind of things that the hope is that this town hall is the beginning of a discussion of something very important, but also to actually have next steps that can help us when there is another event or there's a public safety issue that where we want to be able to talk and communicate with different stakeholders, because really the great thing about this is everybody's so passionate about it. I mean, that's the one thing that we saw was like in the neighborhood council saw that as well in our CPAP meeting, is that people are involved. And so I'm really glad to hear all different sides and different perspectives, because it's really informative to me to learn about how diverse this community is and to hear all the different voices. So I just wanted to just convey that and just tell James, hey, there is a venue for your questions. It's just a matter of like getting people together in the room. But thank you so much.
Thank you. I have Gloria up next. Gloria, let me, her name was, I wrote it down, but I don't see her on here. So
yeah,
She left.
she did.
Okay.
She left. Okay. All right. It's 8:20. I do notice that there are some people with their hands up, and these are people who have had an opportunity to ask questions or make comments earlier. I like to ask the host how much time they would like to spend on repeats.
I would like to give them each a minute for a second round. And then once they're done, Craig's a new hand, so he should get us 2 minutes, but second rounds get 1 minute.
Okay.
And then we'll have to close it off.
Let's go with Craig, since he has not asked the questions. Let's go with Craig, and then time permitting, we'll go with the other people. Go ahead, Craig.
Okay, it's not. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
I hear you.
Okay, great. I have more of a comment because I was attending the CPAB meeting where all this came up, and as the representative, one of the representatives of Northwest San Pedro Neighborhood Council, but as a stakeholder in the community, and I had a lot of problems with how Captain Mastic handled this. And I had a lot of, it was confusing to me because he kept talking about Antifa, but he wasn't talking about the people that were protesting and who they were. He said here that he identified 8 people beforehand when he told us, I didn't know who was there. He didn't, this was a constant thing. Nobody had weapons, but people at the meeting, I believe it was Miss Lambrino, said the same thing. Yeah, Chris, I can see. So my big questions, Captain Mastic, is I felt not representative as a member of the community, and I didn't feel that felt that you were less than being candid with the community about what was happening. I don't expect you to comment on it, but I want you to take it as my constructive criticism.
Okay, Chris, I would like, or Craig, I would like to comment on it. I appreciate your comments. It's something I can really take to heart. All I had in terms of the people who were there, it was that love fest and it had a list of speakers that were there. And that was what was publicly circulated. So I did have that. I myself didn't run them, but I did get communications from the Joint Terrorism Task Force, from Major Crimes, from my department, from Communications Division. I got emails about it. So I had that information, but I hadn't myself gone out and run their names or seen where they were from, if that does clarify it. And if you thought I wasn't as forthright as I could have been, I'm going to just go ahead and take accountability for that and apologize. I hope this is a better venue where I can really address your questions more adequately.
Okay, so we have, like I say, a number of hands that have from people who have asked previous questions. I heard from the one of the organizers that we'll give them a minute to make a comment or ask a question. And then I would like to reserve, with your permission, the last 15 minutes of the time that we have for any last comments that the panelists would like to make. So we'll go ahead with that, with your all permission. So the first person I see on the list here is Regina Mombruno. Regina, go ahead.
Sorry, the buttons, you should, the buttons move around when you mute, unmute, so I've clicked on the wrong person. Regina, you should be good to go now. And again, sometimes it takes us, there you go.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Yes, Regina, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Captain Mastic, for the apology. I mean, this is a good start. Let's just take it from here, okay? I have a question for you. You more than 10 times have referred to this protest as peaceful. Many community members, we feel that this was not peaceful. We feel let down. We feel unsafe. I want to know what qualifies this as a peaceful protest, as they had megaphones on the stage for more than 30 minutes, loud megaphones, flags with the profanity, F the president. It was just a scary day. And none of us, I mean, the whole town was this was not a peaceful protest. So I just want to know how this qualifies as a peaceful protest.
Thank you, Regina. Captain?
So Regina, flags of profanity and F the president, they're on one side of a political spectrum. There is another side of a political spectrum as well. And what someone says, or their opinion about things, or their right to assemble, I can't break them up just on that. That doesn't make it not a peaceful assembly. A negative sentiment, a malicious heart, downright negative, antagonistic messaging. I hear it. I don't like it. I don't approve of it. But that doesn't give me the authority to call it an unlawful assembly and to make a dispersal order. That doesn't qualify as that. And the report I got back that day, when I got the report in, it was, hey, Captain, they had megaphones. We asked them to put them down. Initially, they were reluctant, and then they put them away after the second request. Was that sufficient enough to call it an unlawful assembly and break the entire thing up and arrest everybody there? In my opinion, it wasn't. They had complied with our request. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Captain. The next person for a comment or question would be Reggie Wong. Reggie, you're up.
Hi. Yes, Elsa definitely does have the right to move around and move around wherever she wants. I mean, she's been in Cudahy and Huntington Park and Fullerton causing all this problems and pepper spraying people. But let's move on. I'd like to know, when was the last time anybody saw a BLM protester masked and carrying hand knives or anything like that? And it's kind of funny that some people who organize the event are trying to distance themselves from the Proud Boys. I don't know if this means there's some sort of ideological shift within their movement. I'm just wondering, how would you handle a BLM protest, not a protest, but a rally of that size in the park?
Okay.
And
I think your time is up, Reggie. Captain, would you like to respond to Kathy's or Reggie's comment?
Yes, sir, I certainly would. Depending on the size and nature of the crowd and the event, I would police it in a similar nature. If it's a First Amendment protest, they would be allowed to go and speak their mind. They'd be allowed to assemble. Again, depending on the size and kind of number of attendees and information I had from different sources about the sentiment on social media, and just the best information I had about it, I would plan for the event, I'd deploy for the event. If it was a peaceful event, I imagine it would go down. If my officers had cause to make stops, they would make stops. They had cause for arrests, they'd make arrests. And if there was no cause for arrests or citations, it would go down in a similar way that the event on October 16th went.
Thank you. The next person will be Kathy Crichton.
Hi. Okay, I'll try to be more succinct. I have two questions. One, we've not really defined who the group was that was there. I've heard Latinos for Trump. I've heard Proud Boys. I've heard Peace, Love, and Kumbaya, whatever. So my first question would be on the application that they submitted with either CD15 or Parks and Recs, what name was written on the application officially for the group that was applying for the permit? And the second question, somewhat of an accounting, and I don't know if we know this yet, but just curious, what was the cost to taxpayers like myself for the 119 LAPD officers who patrolled that day? And I do want to say that my biggest takeaway from the whole thing was that our lighthouse, 146-year-old wooden structure, still remains. That was my biggest concern. And when I got up that morning and I saw that our officers in formation, excuse me, around the lighthouse, I was really moved. So thank you, Captain Mastic, for that, and the 119 who kept us safe.
Captain, and looks like Deanne.
Deanne, do you want to go first with question one?
Sure. So I can tell you the group, the organization, the way they filled it out was called Fall Love Fest. And then the representative was an actual individual person. That's as much as I can tell you about that.
Okay, and then to question number two, the cost of the event. I had two groups that were out there. The groups that you saw were on-duty police officers. So they were working already that day. It was kind of, if there's events that I can plan before the work cycle occurs, I put together a certain plan, and sometimes I hire back, sometimes I hire back on overtime. The 118 that you saw out there were regular on-duty folks, police officers. I don't have an accounting of that number, but that number was not on overtime. They would have been on the clock anyway. They were on the clock anyway. I had folks out here all the way from Topanga, the very far west side of the San Fernando Valley, West Bureau police officers, Central Bureau police officers. But the cost for those officers was already day-to-day deployment. They were already on the clock. I did have a contingent of Metropolitan Division police officers. They were staged back by my command post, by the bird sanctuary, the Whaley Bird area back there, and they were on overtime. And I have the number of officers. I have it in mind, but that's an approximation. I'd have to take a look at what we hired back them on overtime, and I'd have to get you a number about that, but I don't have that number in front. In terms of the lighthouse, incidentally, the plan was to keep all of the property and people safe. That was in the event action plan. I hadn't specifically deployed to the lighthouse, but I will tell you, by virtue of putting out 118 police officers in a park the size of Point Fermin, hey, a large contingent of those cops are going to end up over there by that lighthouse. It wasn't protect the lighthouse specifically, but it was protect the facility, protect the stage, protect the amphitheater. protect the trees, protect the lawns. It was protect everything. So that wasn't written in as a particular priority, but I too am very, very glad that that the park infrastructure itself wasn't damaged through the event. Like I said, it was not an event I wanted to have. I didn't want to bring one or more groups that were going to be in conflict into a peaceful park in our corner of the community. It happened that way. I didn't have the authority to stop it one way or the other. The most effective way I thought to manage it was to just police it very, very heavily, which is how we accomplished that.
Great, thank you. Next person in line would be Pat. Pat, you want to go ahead?
Raised, or I guess I do. I don't have a question.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
No problem, Pat. Next person will be Elsa Elgire.
Hello?
Yes,
Yes, yeah. So my name is Elsa Aldeguer.
I'm so sorry. I
Yeah,
apologize.
it's okay. I'm Latina. So I just wanted to answer to Arturo really quick. He was asking why Elsa Aldeguer had more than one group providing protection is because I can have more than one group providing protection. The event was a Latino event. The Proud Boys and also Roof Korean were providing protection. I wanted to make sure that the people that were speaking, and most of them were Latinos, were not gonna get hurt by Antifa, because Antifa, as everyone knows, but people are scared to say it, they are a terrorist organization. But that's the reason why I had more than one group providing protection. And to Mona, I mean, she might not mean something bad when she says that the Latinos are not allowed to be there, but she might be the reason of why we have CRT in our schools, because I'm so against it, but we should not block a Latino group from performing a First Amendment protest, because that applies to everyone regardless of skin color. And regardless if that I don't live over there in San Pedro, like I said,
And that is time.
Thank you. Well, thank you.
You're welcome. Mona, would you like to respond?
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad that that you brought my name up again. So my role as a community advocate is to just ask the question. I'm not against Latinos. I'm not against what happened in the park. I only asked you for just a complete reference as to why a San Pedro park was chosen. And that's really the gist of it. It's nothing personal. And I'm sorry that you're taking it that way. Because I said nothing against Latinos. I said nothing against the group. I merely asked as a representative of a community representative as to how a San Pedro park was chosen. So I'm glad that you brought it up again. So thank you.
Okay. Any
Ray,
other
we have an
response?
individual. Ray, we have an individual that hasn't spoke yet, and Andrea Balk.
Right, I was going to go next. I was going to go to her next. Yeah, I noticed that. Thank you for bringing it up, Melanie. Andrea, you hadn't spoken, so we're going to give you an opportunity. You have 2 minutes.
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. I realize that we are running really late at this point. I think probably a number of us are having a bit of fatigue on this, so I'll try to keep it brief, but I wanted to clarify something. I am a regular attendee at the CPAP meetings. I am familiar with some of you, have met a number of you in person. And I think, I'm hoping that this is just a matter of kind of semantics, but I would like to clarify with Captain Mastic. If I'll back up. I did make the choice to follow the advice and stay home that day. If I had made a different choice, if I had gone And if I had gotten into a disagreement with one of the Proud Boys who were there or any other of the rally members, would I have automatically been labeled an Antifa member by the police?
Thank you, Andrea. Captain?
So Andrea, I don't have a roster. I don't have a label of either group. The after effect of that, I didn't inventory the folks who were there. I didn't ask who was there. I haven't labeled anybody. If you got into a verbal dispute with someone, a police officer would have interceded and ensured that that didn't escalate into a physical dispute. And hopefully just separated people and kind of put them to either corner and maintain the peace. That would have been the goal that day. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. I believe I see another person who has not asked the question. Melissa? Melissa, you have 2 minutes, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, as an Indigenous woman and mother and survivor of genocide of this land, I'm very concerned that these hate crimes or these hate groups were allowed to assemble in a family park, especially Proud Boys, when there's an individual that you could simply Google and his name was Tony Moon. Since the captain right there said he wasn't aware and he doesn't have a roster, I would definitely, suggest that you Google him, Tony Moon, and there's multiple videos of him assaulting women. So again, as being an Indigenous woman of this land and continent, I'm very fearful that he and his Proud Boys and these disgraces of Latinos, brown people, for Trump over there with these people that were seen as insurrections at the Capitol building. We're here in our backyard. That's not okay. That's unacceptable for our community, for our children. I mean, that park is utilized for our kids on the weekend within the community that live back here by Point Fermin. So it's a shame that they were allowed to assemble to spew their hate. And I would definitely recommend that you do your research on these groups because it's dangerous and detrimental to our community and not what San Pedro is about, especially even though it's conservative, it has always been open and very community-based. This hate should not be allowed. And I really would ask you to do your research and please do not allow them to come back because it's scary. It invokes PTSD in a lot of Indigenous people that are still here. We are very quiet, but we are here and we are frightened by this kind of people being allowed to come into the community. It's unacceptable and you guys need to do better in policing them and keeping them out. This is unacceptable. It's not safe for the children. Thank you.
Okay, so I have heard you loud and clear. I did have similar concerns. I'm not painting anybody with a particular color. But I did have similar concerns that it might erupt into violence. One message I'm trying to get through is unless I have a crime here in my community in Los Angeles or in California, I can't just prohibit someone from being there. I'm not commenting one way or another on their speech or their assembly or what their message was. I didn't want groups that were going to be in conflict here in our community. So I wasn't pleased that the event happened. I didn't want conflict. The way I chose to manage that was to police the event very heavily. So I hear you. Your messages come through loud and clear. Your messages come through not through your voice, not just your voice, but through many other speakers who've spoken tonight about their concerns. So I hear you, and I have concerns about the conflict as well. I have concerns about the message as well. But unless I have a crime, I can't call an unlawful assembly. I can't arrest folks. Yeah, I hear you, but I don't have the authority to make an arrest in those circumstances.
Thank you, Melissa, and thank you, Captain. I see that Jacob Hake has joined us, and I'd like to give him an opportunity since early on
I would like to ask Jacob a question that's come up several times since before he entered. Can I do that?
Well, maybe if we can give Jacob an opportunity to say something if you would like, and then we'll move on to your question because we're getting close to our end, if that's okay. Jacob, would you like to say anything?
Hey, good evening, everybody. Sorry, I'm late. I had another meeting that I got pulled into that I could not get away from. I don't want to hold you up. I just want to say hello and then I'll turn it right over to you and open up for questions so we don't lose any more time. I believe you're already over time.
Jacob, one of the questions that's been coming up from several people that they brought up was on social media, there was a posting by CD15 that said that about the Proud Boys event and that it wouldn't be allowed and the police would keep it from happening. And then the question was asked, then the LAPD allowed the event to happen and under the protests, and the cops were there. And so people were kind of confused when CD15 said the event wasn't going to happen and the police were going to be there to keep them from even having it. And then the message that LAPD had is they had the event. So a lot of people have brought that up tonight. And so I think it's important that we address that, because one of the things that was driving this town hall too is to make sure that everybody gets their answers and the messaging is the same all across city departments when something like this happens in the future, and try and correct some of the mishaps that have happened this time around.
No, absolutely. So let me say, hopefully our post didn't confuse anybody. We do defer to LAPD and Rec and Parks in this case and city attorney, and we're collaborating with them to make sure that we had the right information. So first of all, let me say that, you know, it always gets a little tricky because it's freedom of speech. And there's definitely times where there's events that are happening that don't fit my views and don't necessarily want to see them at my parks. It is part of the freedoms that people express and part of our rights that we have as citizens. And I think as we've gotten more in a litigious kind of age now where people sue for just about everything, we do take time to make sure that we look at all these things and make sure that they are complying with law. And again, I apologize that I was late, so hopefully I'm not going to repeat anything that was already said, but although there is freedom of speech, there are rules that you have to abide by when you are in a park, when you want to have a large gathering, you want to have amplified music. There are still rules that you have to abide by. If they're out in the sidewalk and marching on the sidewalk and protesting, you know, that's public area. But on parks, they still have to have a permit. They still have to have insurance and different things. So at the time, they did not meet any of those requirements. And so we did relay that. We did receive a lot of concerns that the Proud Boys were coming to San Pedro. They were, the history that they have at their other events isn't good, and what the element that they bring with them. And then counter protests have also seemed to follow them, and sometimes there are clashes. So we had a lot of concerns, but again, it is freedom of speech. So in concurring with Rec and Parks and LAPD, they hadn't met that criteria. The event organizers had posted on their website that they were canceling the event. They blamed the city and they were going to move it elsewhere. And it seemed like last minute, or you know, try to do it secretly, they decided that they were going to hold the event anyways, but keep it in the public right of way. Now the public right of way is different from the park. And so that's where it gets a little trickier. And that's where it makes it more difficult for LAPD. At that point, it's out of Rec and Parks jurisdiction. It's purely in LAPD's, but it's the public right of way, just like any street that we can drive on. And as long as they're not blocking the right of way, they are allowed to peacefully protest. And so we were, you know, honestly, we were disappointed that they still plan to have their event. We still had some concerns. I know LAPD went to great lengths to make sure that the safety of the community was there, but also to not have too much heavy of a presence at one moment, so they would spark anything off. So again, I want to give kudos to Captain Masick and the team at Harbor Division for having that balanced approach, that they ensured the safety of our community, but also you know, didn't have a heavy presence. So hopefully it wasn't too confusing of an answer, but to sum it up, it was canceled. It wasn't going to be in the park. They moved it to the sidewalk, and that's where it made it difficult.
Okay, thank you, Jacob.
You're right.
We're at 8:48. We wanted to shut this down by 9. So I think if we can, again, with the permission of the hosts, if we can take the next 10 to 12 minutes for any last words by the organizers of the event today and any of the panelists that were on. So
Yeah, that's fine, Ray.
I'll turn it over to Melanie and or Chris to kick off the last words.
So what I want to say is this is the start of a conversation that we really wanted everyone to have after attending CPAB and seeing how many people had so many questions and there wasn't enough time to cover it. And as a neighborhood council, this is what our job is for our stakeholders to represent them, represent the residents of San Pedro, to bring a forum for them to get the answers that they need. And so it's our hope that everyone got some sort of clearness of this and some sort of information that helped them, move forward and be able to move beyond this event. And now we can collaborate going forward for the community in events like this that may occur again, as to how we have the message across and deal with them for the public. Chris, do you want to say anything?
Sure, thank you. First of all, thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you to everyone who attended. I didn't put a number on who I thought would justify as a successful attendance, but I'm glad to see that there literally dozens of people, and that people took the time to sit through the whole meeting, and they had their own questions and comments, and that was really kind of my conceptual goal, was simply to have people kind of show up for one another, to have these conversations, to get a lot of good practical information. I would say, a lot of the decision-making and procedural things that the police officers were able to give us was very useful. I would tell you, just as a matter of, personal knowledge and kind of things that you should know out in the world, go look up the LAMC 5507 in terms of what people are and are not allowed to carry around. So like Melanie said, I believe and I hope that this is the beginning of better understanding between neighbors. Essentially, we obviously saw a very wide range of political concepts on how these things should be done, or why they were done, or who was involved. And we don't need to overlap on all those things. What we do need to do is understand boundaries and how we conduct ourselves when we're in public with these beliefs that we have. And I think that we took a big step towards having a sort of acknowledgement of understanding, this is how you do it, this is how you don't do it. And I believe that we were very lucky that, it didn't go anywhere, though apparently nobody wanted so badly to cause trouble that they decided to go ahead and do it. The police did not have to keep a lid on it any more than they did. And, I think we learned a lesson kind of on the cheap, considering other communities have had, it's a much harder time with things that on their own managed to spiral. And I'm hoping that the kind of standards and expectations that we establish here with community members, with law enforcement, with policymakers, is something that kind of radiates outward and becomes more of a culture of San Pedro, which I think we've already have. This is an engaged, involved community, which is kind of what I was counting on when we had the idea to put this meeting on. So I'm hoping that we can all take these things forward, and we're more willing to reach out to one another and more informed and prepared for when we do that.
I agree. Okay.
Thank you. Any of the panelists like to say some last words?
If I can. So again, I apologize, I was on late, and I was happy that I can join and answer that question. But I just want to thank you guys for organizing this. I would tell you, over the many years I've worked for the city, the freedom of speech issue, it's reared its ugly head at times. But it's, most of the time everything's great. We have amazing events and they're peaceful, but every now and then we get these one-offs, and it's frustrating. And it gets into that area of what's allowed or not allowed, but there are followers. But I just really want to thank, again, Rec and Parks and the Rangers, LEPD, and just how professionally they handled it. They kept the peace. It seemed like some of the videos I've seen looks like they were trying to draw people in to draw reactions, but the community handled it well. But But thank you guys for putting this together. And we probably should have more of these just to be able to answer questions and have this type of dialogue with our communities and just really educate everybody. Yeah, I mean, it just so they have a better understanding and what's happening. But just want to say that. Thank you so much.
Again, I want to thank everybody that took the time. I mean, for 3 hours of their night to be here to do this. It really, we appreciate it. And the neighborhood council looks forward to working with everybody and building a greater relationship with all the departments.
And Jacob really just kind of said it for all of us, I think. Thank you guys for putting this together. Giving the community a voice and a chance to ask questions, I think, is really important. And so, again, if we need to do it again on different topics, just let us know. But I do want to take this time, Captain Mastic, Sergeant Zone, I know your senior lead officers are on and they're listening. And I want them to know that they are excellent. I have never seen a better set of senior lead officers than in the Harbor Division. My area extends to the southwest, the southeast, Newton, and 77th Division as well. And so I come in contact with many senior lead officers, and I will tell you, yours are the very best. So they definitely work closely with our park directors and my supervisors as well. And they all have my phone number too, and they are more than willing and helpful all the time. So I just wanted to reach out and say thank you as well. And Sergeant Holmes, thank you for being on tonight and supporting us all the time as you do as our Ranger Division. And of course, the Northwest Neighborhood Council, thank you guys for taking the time to put this together again.
Thank you. And I guess I would be remiss if I didn't single out and recognize Ray Regalado, who has been a very consistent professional, the voice of moderation as a professional moderator, who has helped us, really establish a good culture of professionalism at the Northwest Neighborhood Council. He was kind of on the short list to ask to help us out with this, but he's one of those people who helped get me involved in this system. And in, hopefully reaching out to everybody else who's here, both our attendees and panelists, we can kind of continue that tradition. But I would also like to remind everybody, because we do have board members who are either attendees who have commented, this is a good opportunity for people who have interest in these issues to take a greater interest in your neighborhood council, Central and Coastal and Northwest. Rely on your input and your participation, because that's all I am, is some guy who decided to show up to a meeting, and here I am hosting meeting. And any of you can do that. Any of you, who have these things to offer, please do, come to the committees, come to the board meetings, and you can engage with us on social media or elsewhere. And these conversations and this understanding is what makes a strong community and a healthy community. So please, more of this.
Yep. Thank you, Ray.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you for the opportunity to allow me to be part of this. This is what makes community. I've had the opportunity to do this throughout the county. This is what builds a close community that allows respectful dialogue to go on. I see this as what we can do when we work together. We may not always agree, but definitely we can always sit around the table and have the discussion and share our ideas. So thank you all for being here. I really appreciate the opportunity to see some real faces that I've heard about, and I hope given the next time there's a need for community conversation, I'm always here to help out whenever you need me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ray.
Okay, I think unless someone really needs to say something, I think we can probably say goodnight and thank you all the attendees for sticking through this, all the good comments, and we had some good information that was passed, and I think there's going to be an opportunity to continue this conversation as we move forward. Thank you, Mona, for the great work you do at CPAB. I really appreciate that, and all the great work Rec and Parks and LAPD. And I'm really, really thankful for the involvement of the Neighborhood Council and all the people who attended. Thank you all for being here tonight. Good night, all.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.